himself up 3 times before the elbow. He was playing possum on the 4th time.
Well, Savage has been to the mountaintop. He stood on top of that mountain before. Now it's Dallas' Page's turn. He wants to be on that mountaintop, and he's going to go there if he has to drag Savage with him.
Diamond Cutter.
This podcast is a member of the Place to Be Nation family. Visit us at placetobenation.com. The only place to be in your pop culture world.
You want to step into the real world? You were born to be a chalk outline.
This isn't your big day. It's your last day on the planet Earth. Oh, yeah.
You are a dead man walking.
And tonight, there's no tomorrow. Tonight, it's going to be you with Kimberly in your corner for all of the spoil.
But rage is a powerful emotion. And in this case, I think I'm just going to let it ride.
I learned how to turn negatives into positives. Raven, you only turn positives into negatives.
There's the man, U.S. heavyweight champion, Diamond Dallas Page. Ladies and gentlemen,
DDP all over the place.
Grab your plunder and open the pay window. It's time for Survey Says.
The sun might be setting on the summer of Survey Says, but we are committed to sending it out with a bang. Welcome, Place to Be Nation, to the festivities where we are all jacked up here at the Jersey Shore. Now, this episode, I should mention, happens to coincide with our 2nd anniversary as a podcast. You could say it's all been leading here. Arguably the reason Survey Says exists in the first place. We're celebrating our anniversary, sending out the summer, giving praise to our subject. At long last, we are covering the People's Champion, Diamond Dallas Page. Now, I should mention, I am, of course, Timothy Scum Capel, here with my broadcast partner, Andy Scum Savage Helene. And we could not do this without a critically important guest, and that is the co-host of the NBA Team podcast. He is a, as I like to say, jack of all trades, master of some, and a diamond in the rough, reuniting Survey Says Triad, Mr. Andrew Riche. Privileged to have you back, Andrew. How are you doing?
Oh, I am glad to be back. The only reason I did this was so I could say I am a two-time Survey Says guest member.
The two-time tag team champions are the greatest trifecta ever.
Oh, yeah. Getting the catchphrases in early.
Yes. Before there was 5, I'm sorry, Booker T, but there was 2. Literally,
right.
Like 2 comes before 5.
Yeah, and there was 3, but we'll be getting to that.
Yes.
Andy, how are you, sir?
I am jacked in Jacksonville.
I'm jacked to be in Jacksonville!
Jacked in Jacksonville. We're at Jacksonville and we're at the Jersey Shore. How about that? What a hell of a party. All right, so we're talking Diamond Dallas Page, and what I thought would be good to start us off is, you know, we've probably gone through our wrestling origin stories a time or two. Andrew, you've been on the show, so we can mark that off the list. So that's pretty convenient.
Slamboree 96. When
right.
When Jimmy Hart is put on the table, watch out for the little kid. That's me.
You lost your mind?
Yes.
You got to
touch. Because Luger, like I said in the last show, Lex Luger was handcuffed to Jimmy Hart, and he draped Hart over the table because the Giant was going to chokeslam Sting through it to stop him. And I was trying to get Luger to like give me a high five, but Luger was like not like totally stiff me. And I was just so I started trying to grab Jimmy Hart's jacket, and then a security man like moved me out of the way, said, "Get away from him! Don't touch him." You know,
sent you flying.
Yes. Like I'm there, and then I'm not. If you watch the shot, like my hand is there, and then it's just gone, like the leftovers. It just disappeared.
Oh, I love that reference I just marked out. We're getting We're getting all my faves in here on this.
Yeah, that's the only time you'll ever hear a leftovers name drop on a wrestling podcast.
Yes, or possibly any Place V Nation podcast.
Well, when y'all do your next comics one, the guy who creates that show is doing Watchmen on HBO, so he's got a lot of fanfare going his way.
Well, it will pale in comparison to Place V Nation Comics Theater Watchmen, as we know. But we're getting off already. So let's just talk a little bit about our first impressions of Diamond Dallas Page. So Andrew, you talk about coming in at kind of that 96 as your first live event. DDP was around then, which we will certainly cover in our journey here. But do you remember the first time you saw him and what your reaction? Did you like the guy? Did he make much of an impression?
Well, my first show that I ever saw as a wrestling fan was WrestleMania 6. So in actuality, without me even knowing it, I saw the first show I ever saw as, for pro wrestling, I saw Diamond Dallas Page. And because he was an extra driving was it a Cadillac or a convertible?
It was the Cadillac, the pink Cadillac.
It was a Cadillac, so that for Rhythm and Blues, when they were going to debut their new song, I think Hunka Hunka Hunky Love. Was that it?
Yeah.
Yeah, Greg Valentine was the other one who he's literally got two left feet, and they're trying to dance this song, and in the Cadillac with a couple ladies is the chauffeur, the driver is none other than Mr. Diamond Dallas Page himself. When it comes to WCW, the first memory I had of him was really when he had his most featured matches in terms of an individual feud, which also coincided when Kimberly debuted as his valet, and that was when he was wrestling Johnny B. Bad. Most people know him as Mark Marrow from WWF, but the Johnny B. Bad matches, not necessarily that they were great, that was just my first real glimpse at Diamond Dallas Page, because it seemed like every pay-per-view or Clash of Champions, they wrestled each other.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. That stretch
Johnny
for sure.
would always get the push because Johnny was always going to go over on Page. But, Page was trying – he tried very late in life to be a wrestler, much later than most people would. But that's my first memory. When I first saw him in terms of his performance, he tried all those different types of gimmicks before he really landed on what made him successful.
Right.
So, he had the cigar, and he had the kind of the tank top look, like he had the singlets, and that was pretty much my first memory. But the one thing I do remember is that he was really tall. The first thing I always noticed about Dallas was that he was a really tall wrestler.
How about you, Andy? Where does DDP come in with your WCW wrestling fandom?
He really didn't stand out to me a whole lot until the Macho Man feud, because I ordered that one Spring Stampede show, and I guess I really wasn't too invested into what he was doing until I saw that match.
Yeah, I'm pretty similar in that regard. I didn't even start watching WCW regularly until the end of '97, so the first time I would have ever seen Diamond Dallas Page was Starrcade '97. Didn't make a huge impression on me there, even though he did win the U.S. title. But once he got involved in that Raven feud with the Flock and Chris Benoit, that's when that's when I really lit up and started taking notice of him more, because that was the first wrestling feud in WCW that I got invested in. So I was hooked really from there. And I don't know, it's kind of props to Raven and his stable for the heel work they were doing. I don't know that I would have gotten as into DDP had I not had them as my gateway. So fun stuff all around.
Yeah, because even though, like I said, I kind of took notice of him more in '97 because of the Savage feud, it really wasn't until that Raven feud where I would call myself a fan. And then the one time I went to a Live Thunder, I actually made a sign, and it had DDP, and it had I drew the big diamond and wrote "bang" on it. I was too far away to be on TV.
What a mark.
Yeah.
I never did any signs at any of the live shows that I went to. I don't know I was never one to have any visual artistic talent in the first place.
And if you did it in the late 90s, I promise you, everybody and their grandmother had a sign, so it's almost impossible to see it.
Yeah.
The only one I ever remember bringing was a very small Bret Hart sign to a Nitro in the Superdome. It said, "I believe in Bret." It was literally like 2 months after the screw job. Like, it was leading into Sold Out 97, which was his first like actual match with WCW, and I brought a sign for Bret Hart. Didn't make air.
Little red heart mark there. Yeah, I love it. So Diamond Dallas Page Falkenberg, as you learned, was his shoot name before the show, Andrew.
that sounds like a bad guy in a Polish superhero movie. Page Falkenberg.
What's a Polish superhero movie?
Or maybe like a Polish villain in a superhero movie or something like that. A bad James Bond villain might be the better way of saying it.
Oh my God! One of those like direct-to-video rip-offs of a actual superhero franchise. I love it. Great last name. So, and I also love that you didn't know that until we started the show.
I did not know his real name. I mean, I just imagined his last name was Page.
It's fantastic. Well, they called Kimberly Page, so you'd think. Yeah. Well, did you think he had a different first name then? Or he just went by Dallas?
I thought he just had his first. It was like Ferdinand Page or something. Something really random. And then when I looked up on Wikipedia right before we were getting started, it blew me away. Page Joseph Falkenberg.
Yes. Ferdinand Dallas Page.
Ferdinand Dallas Page. FDP.
Yes. So Ferdinand Dallas Page, he got his start with the AWA managing Bad Company in 1988. Bad Company, of course, being Paul Diamond and Pat Tanaka. Might be better known to folks as the good or better version of the Orient Express and the WWF. Fun stuff. And at the same time, Page was managing a nightclub in Fort Myers, Florida called Norma Jean's. He had the pink Cadillac parked out in front. Yeah, I bet that was a fun place to party in the late 80s.
Yeah, have you guys watched the DDP documentary from WWE?
No. Is it on the network?
I don't know if it's on the network, but back in the spring I bought it and I watched it. And yeah, you talking about his car out there, that's how they contacted him to do the WrestleMania. That's
kind of awesome. I mean, it is a very iconic and very arresting visual that pink Cadillac strikes. So pretty neat. He did work a ton of dates, it seems like, with the AWA. Have you guys seen any of this footage, any of this stuff?
None. I have never seen a second of Diamond Dallas Page in AWA. I mean, now, I'll be granted, I have not seen a lot of AWA period in my lifetime.
Sure.
I've seen different ones like the Midnight Rockers, Kurt Hennig, and even some Nick Bockwinkel, Hulk Hogan matches. But like in terms of Page when he was with Bad Company, and it says even here that the stable's called the Diamond Exchange with Medusa and Kurt Hennig. I have zero memory of that.
Kind of would like to see some of that. Maybe that'll hit the network.
I do remember Colonel De Beers because Colonel De Beers was one of those people that was like an AWA mainstay.
Right.
You know, like he was there. He was like all over their shows, like on ESPN. So if you ever watch one of those ESPN AWA episodes or the ones on the network, I'm pretty sure Colonel De Beers is on it. Dick the Bruiser is probably on it, and
yes.
I
otherwise known as Popeye,
and Larry the Axe Hennig. Like those guys were there till the very end.
De Beers was in the Diamond Exchange as well, apparently.
Yes.
All right.
That's what it claims.
You guys need to see that documentary thing because you just kind of reminded me that there's an extra on there where it's like he's doing a tryout video where it's just him. I think he's making everything up on the fly, but he's cutting promos like in the studio and he's like introducing all the members of his Diamond Exchange, and he's doing what he's doing like in WCW, like the sleazy, almost like car salesman type like hype job. But then he brings out some midget, and I guess the midget's like on a collar or on a leash in some I think some women are leading him around or something, but it was just
really
bizarre. But he's like, I don't know. It's like funny because he's introducing all these wrestlers, and I think he's just making it up off the top of his head.
That sounds pretty awesome. I do want to see that.
I wanted to get audio of it, but I can't get it off of Blu-ray. I should have got the DVD.
A lot of, I mean, he was the Godfather before the Godfather was the Godfather.
Yeah,
you're kind of right.
Yeah.
I never thought about it.
He had a girl on his side basically everywhere he went until he found Kimberly. Maybe he had him on the side while he was with Kimberly. Not trying to besmirch him, but
he does have grown children, daughters that we saw at the his Hall of Fame induction, which I never knew he had any children whatsoever.
No, I agree. That took me completely by
surprise. It was like, holy shit. So in any case, in 1989, he was also doing commentary with, of all people, Gordon Solie for Florida Championship Wrestling. This over like about a 2-year period. Now, I have heard some of his commentary with Gordon, and it's about as weird as you'd expect. I don't know. He was doing that Michael P.S. Hayes thing a little bit before he would actually become associated with Michael Hayes. And it's just, I don't know. He's doing color. He's on color, of course, but him and Gordon is just, if you thought that Jesse Ventura and Jim Ross were a styles clash in WCW, check out some of this FCW footage.
Is it worse than Gorilla Monsoon and Johnny Polo?
Hey, I kind of like those guys.
Oh yeah, I like the dynamic. Like like Jim Ross and Paul Heyman did not seem to get along like on screen, but I bet they were having a ton of fun like jabbing at each other all the time.
Yeah.
And I mean, I have no idea what their relationship outside the booth was like, but that might be a better dynamic, honestly, was Gorilla and Johnny Polo. Not as entertaining, certainly, but that might be the better comparison to hold up. But there's some of this stuff on YouTube, at least there was as of a few months ago when I got curious. So, yeah, have a look-see. As you mentioned, Andrew, in 1990, he chauffeurs Rhythm and Blues to the ring, WrestleMania 6 in his pink Cadillac. He did have a tryout, apparently, with the WWF at this time that didn't really go anywhere. And his other gigs in Florida were drying up. Of course, AWA, dying days. So kind of adrift now, but he's friends with Dusty Rhodes. Dusty Rhodes is the booker for WCW. Brings in Page in 1991. So he has his WCW debut at Super Brawl 1, is brought out as the new mouthpiece for the Freebirds. Andy, you and I covered that show when we did our Super Brawl retrospective.
Oh, yeah, one of my favorites.
That show is just off the wall. Talk about throwing everything at the wall to see what sticks. Most of it does fall off the wall. But Page would stick around. I don't know, I was sort of into his promo at that show. He makes a decent first impression. You figure someone's going to be pretty rough around the edges when they've never had a national platform before, but he acquits himself okay doing the type of character he was doing. Again, that very used car salesman-y type of guy, and managing the Freebirds, who we're on record not being fans of here on Survey Says, but maybe DDP makes them a little bit more palatable. So he goes on to manage them. They have a WCW World Tag Team Championship win against Doom. Is that right? And what we were looking at pre-show, Andrew.
Mm-hmm.
And he's managing Scott Hall as the Diamond Stud around this time as well, 1991. A time-displaced Scott Hall. I thought that 1991 Scott Hall looked older than 1998 Scott Hall.
he had a lot of meat on his bones too.
He sure did, man.
Yeah, so did Page. Page was pretty plump, in his early days. I'm sure he was doing physical training, but he was just a big, portly guy,
Everybody's like, they have like an air hose up their ass. They're just sort of inflated.
Yes.
And it's through managing the Diamond Stud that Page decides to start wrestling. He didn't foresee a long shelf life as a manager, and at the advice of Magnum TA, begins training at the WCW power plant. He was 35 years old at the time that he decided to become a full-time wrestler. I cannot imagine. How does somebody do this?
It's unbelievable. It's a testament to his effort, to be willing to, put your neck out there at 35 years old and just start from scratch as a wrestler. You almost have to leave everything behind. I know he still managed Kevin Nash when he was Vinny Vegas later on, and had some good connections, the one thing that it did benefit for him because of his advanced days is that because he worked in the AWA, because he worked in Florida, because he had been friends with a lot of the WCW quote unquote mid-card acts that wound up being successful later in the 90s, that kind of helped him build that rapport so that as he improved, he was more likely the boys were more willing to work with him and give him some wins.
Yeah, that definitely tracks in my head too. And I have to figure he's somebody that to that point in his life and at that age, figure he doesn't have to do this. He's here because he wants to be here, because he can't see himself doing something else and being happy. I mean, I don't know what happened with the nightclub, Norma Jeans or whatever, but seems like that was a relatively successful business venture. And as we will see later on, I mean, this is a pretty entrepreneurial guy. He could make a lot of things work when he really set out and committed himself to whatever.
He practiced what he preached.
Absolutely, yes. And at this point, for whatever reason, he was awfully committed to making it work as a professional wrestler. And as you mentioned, this is when Vinny Vegas, a.k.a. Kevin Nash, the former Oz, good Lord, Oz also making his debut at Super Brawl 1. He begins working with Page as well. And Scotty Flamingo, Scott Levy, future Raven, and Johnny Polo. So all these things, all these interesting connections, that they're going to come back around. And the stable is no longer the Diamond Exchange, but now the Diamond Mine. So you've got DDP, you've got the Diamond Stud, kind of loose affiliations with these other dudes. As you said, Andrew, tagging with Kevin Nash, Vinny Vegas as the Vegas Connection, just all over the place, really. I do wish, and this is something I've probably expressed on other shows, but I wish in this kind of late 91, 92 time period that we had gotten, and follow me here, like a rubbish mid-card Wargames match with the Diamond Stud, some combination of DDP, the Freebirds, maybe throw in a Vinny Vegas or a Diamond Stud, certainly. Maybe throw in Scotty Flamingo. Hell, against
that makes too much sense. We should do a scaffold match.
Yes. Thank you, Dusty Rhodes.
Poor Bobby Eaton. I saw a highlight of the '91 Great American Bash not long ago, and I mean, I think it's Bobby Eaton that's up there with Steve Austin, right? And PN News, PN News is terrified on that. It's he will not move on the scaffold. He's literally doing the duck walk across the plank because he's so scared he's gonna fall.
Yeah, he was legit scared. I'm glad you brought him up though, because who would be the face team to go against the rubbish heel jobber Wargames opponents? I think you need PN News.
Z-Man would be the team captain.
Tom Zink.
Yeah. You need Z-Man for sure. You need
maybe Flying Brian.
Maybe Flying Brian.
because he was feuding, I believe, with Scotty Flamingo, who was part of the Diamond Mine.
And then maybe get in like a Van Hammer. Maybe an early Johnny B. Bad.
Yeah, because he was a heel at first, right? The Johnny character was a heel, kind of. And then they sort of twisted it to where he was like a confetti-throwing babyface.
Mm-hmm. Now, I can't remember when that shift exactly happened. I guess it depends on when
It was when he hosted the bikini contest between Missy Hyatt and Medusa. That's when he was trying to, like, turn into, like, a babyface. And Jesse hated Johnny B. Bad.
Right.
He couldn't wait to just shit all over him every time he had a chance.
And he was admittedly quite awful back then.
Yes.
So, although he has the boxing match in late '92 at that November Clash.
Oh, I like that one.
yeah, with Scotty Flamingo, and DDP is in Scotty's corner for that boxing match.
Is that the same Clash where Sting and Rude went to a time limit draw in the King of Cable tournament? Yes, I remember that one very, very well.
Mm-hmm. And this is spray the water into the glove of Scotty Flamingo, and I guess
because the water hurts so bad when you put it.
Well, the glove is just so much heavier now.
Yeah.
And he gets the win. The very obvious, I guess, knockout over Johnny B. Bad. I think that's how it went.
Yeah, it was silly fun. It was fun.
The water spot was in there for sure.
Yeah.
Well, tragically, our fantasy booking of this great stable, the Diamond Mine, must come to an end or the Vegas Connection, whatever you want to call it.
Yeah, the York Foundation Part 2, whatever it is.
Man.
Yeah.
Gosh, now I'm thinking of what the York Foundation name of DDP would be.
Dallas Page, which is now his real legal name.
Yeah. Ferdinand Dallas.
Ferdinand Dallas Page.
Yeah.
Now we have two made-up characters with the first name Ferdinand. One is John Cena, and the other is Diamond Dallas Page.
There we go. We're only like 20 minutes in here. Tragically, this would all come to an end because DDP suffers a rotator cuff tear, and he is out for basically the entirety of 1993. I've heard that he left of his own volition because he was hurt and wanted to take time away to work on his character, come back. Also heard he was just fired. This would have been the Bill Hwatt era. He's doing all that cost cutting. Figure he might want to get rid of some dead weight. I don't know. Whatever the case may be, he is gone for 1993. Spends this time with Jake Roberts, who he considers a mentor and trainer, improving his overall ring psychology and persona, learning more about, what it is to be a professional wrestler, those important intangibles, as they say. And Jake Roberts, a favorite of mine as well. So this story just becomes even more dear to my heart, just hearing some of the anecdotes about from those two. I think, was this the same time that Jake was living with him and the snake got loose in his house?
That's one of the famous stories, that Kimberly and them were at Jake's house, and the snake was in the bathroom, I think.
Yeah, it was in the tub.
Yeah.
It might have been the cobra at the time. I don't know. In any case, it was
Jake just had no idea where that snake was, did he? Like, how many of these things you've heard in interviews where it's like, yeah, the snake got loose on the tarmac at the airport, and yeah, the snake got through the barricade, and I didn't grab it. It's like, for a guy who's like Jake the Snake Roberts, he had a lot of trouble handling like Damien and Lucifer.
I guess the shit just got old, and he was not certainly the most qualified person to be working with live animals. So he told a story on Ride Along recently where it's him and Jim Duggan on the road, and the snake was in the back seat, got loose, got out of the bag, and was like coiled around the gas and the brake pedal, and like they had a hard time actually stopping the car because the snake was so jammed up in the
Oh, shit.
Oh my God.
Yeah, so I had to pull off and get the snake in order. But anyway, we'll do a Jake Robertson WCW podcast where we'll talk for 15 minutes about his WCW career and then 2 hours about just Jake road stories. But we're talking Diamond Dallas Page, and after that 1-year hiatus, he came back to WCW in 1994, this time with Kimberly in tow as the Diamond Doll. He's added a bodyguard to his ensemble, that being Max Muscle. And this goes back to what you were saying, Andrew, how he's pulling out every gimmick, every trick in the book to try to get himself over. The hot chick, interfering bodyguard, all these gaudy outfits and bling, chomping on cigars. And was any of it really working? I mean, I've watched some 94 DDP, and it's just kind of, he's more caricature than he is character.
Yeah. The only thing he retained from any of that early version when he did that was probably that swagger walk that he used to have, where he would like kind of shimmy his shoulders as he walked.
Mm-hmm.
That was like kind of like that confident sort of entrance. Outside of that, in terms of the wardrobe, it was like literally like night and day between that and when he really hit the big time.
He is just all over the place. Not doing a ton of pay-per-views, but I don't know, kind of one of those enhancement type guys, and does have a match against, again, Johnny B. Bad. He's going to come up a bit more at Spring Stampede 94. They're not feuding as such, but they have a decent little exhibition match. Now, I guess we talked about that with you, Andrew, because first time you were on Survey Says was covering these pay-per-views of 1994.
Yes, Spring Stampede and Slamboree right before Hogan got there, because it's one of our favorites. But you know, in terms of success, like I don't know if it would be considered financially like a really successful show. But yeah, that was literally the first match of, like, it was like the opening match for Spring Stampede. It was Diamond Dallas Page,
and that was when Johnny was getting good, not totally there yet, but his 1994 was like his breakout year. And I think he, is going to be the one who's carrying that match, since as a wrestler, DDP is not there yet. I do think he puts it together sooner than maybe other people look at that, in terms of him developing the total package, in terms of his ring work, his character, promos. But we're not there in 94. Going into 95, he's doing arm wrestling challenges. A lot of shit with Dave / Evad Sullivan.
Oh no.
Yeah, this is like, you figure this guy, if he can get through this, then maybe there's something to him. But it almost feels like trial by fire, or just a weed out process of, you're going to eat shit for a while. And if you can do this, then you can do anything.
Before they did like a kayfabe hiatus for him, he was all over WCW Saturday Night, because Nitro had just started late in 95, and he would be on Nitro to my knowledge, but it wasn't normal. But on Worldwide and on I guess Main Event too. I can't remember what purpose Main Event served once Nitro started, but on WCW Saturday Night, he was on there every single week.
It's crazy. I've watched not these entire shows, just because I've never really had access to them, but there's like a DDP compilation that I won't say how. It doesn't matter, of course. But in any case, I've watched some of this early WCW or mid-90s WCW DDP stuff before he took off. And it's insane to me how much screen time he actually got. But as you said, it's all on Saturday Night, which he kind of took over in a way. This feud with Sullivan. So they had the arm wrestling challenge at Great American Bash, right? They have a real match at, I believe it was Bash at the Beach or Slamboree. In any case, we don't need to see that because what we're getting to is his first singles championship, that being the World Television title, beating the Renegade at Fall Brawl. What a match, guys, right? What's your favorite Renegade match, and why is it this?
I've heard that before. My favorite Renegade match was probably anyone that he lost.
Well, you're in luck.
Yeah, and we finally found one. You know, Renegade was weird because he was obviously a Warrior ripoff, but they were really pushing him fast. Like, was he the one who went over on Steve Austin, or was that or was it Arn Anderson that he got put over on?
He got put over Arn Anderson for the TV belt.
Yeah, it must have been Duggan who jobbed out Austin for the U.S. title. Yes. And that was when that conspiracy theory started to kick in like late 94, early 95. Oh, Hogan's just bringing all of his friends in.
Yes, that the well-documented saga of Hulk Hogan and his cronies, leading to Andy's favorite, the Honky Tonk Man in WCW. Triggered, I know. But in winning the World Television Championship, he does go on, does DDP, to a proper feud with Johnny B. Bad now. So these are the matches, and this is the feud I think most of us remember when we talk Johnny B. Bad and early DDP interactions. They have a really probably best in terms of work rate match at Halloween Havoc in 95. That show being infamous for many reasons. Bad wins the TV title. And this is interesting to me because throughout their feud, it's like Page losing all the matches. And you think of most dudes when they have a losing streak gimmick like that, or they lose every match in the feud, it does nothing for them, you know? But this is different in that there are stakes for all their matches. So he loses the title at Havoc. They have a rematch at World War III. That's where basically like Kimberly is on the line, and Johnny B. Bad wins the managerial services of Kimberly. Then at Super Brawl, now we're in 96. That's where I guess he gets the money, right? So,
the mysterious benefactor.
Well, we're getting to that. This is where DDP and Kimberly are millionaires. What started out, he won all these arm wrestling tournaments, and I don't know how you make your millions.
Yeah, he lost to Dave Sullivan.
Yes, and he lost to Dave Sullivan, of all people. So that's rather suspect, right?
Yes.
And then they said, like, they kind of retconned it and said that she won the money at bingo. So here again, how much money are we talking? What bingo halls are they frequenting? But
and that bingo hall was in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania.
I sure hope so. That's the only way that I can that I think I can abide any of this.
Well, the thing about Kimberly too is that Kimberly was not like wrestling hot. She was like Stacy Keibler, Tori Wilson, like hot.
Yeah, I know what you're saying. Right. There is a distinction, and I guess that's why we've seen her in ventures outside of wrestling, which is good. So he's lost her, he's lost their money, and that. Okay, so there is an interesting little sidebar to this, which is he's continuing to wrestle on Saturday night. Do you all remember he's like, after he's lost his money, he's trying to like pawn off all of his shit. So the bling, even some of his wrestling gear, he's trying to sell, and you'll see like Disco Inferno wrestling on WCW Saturday Night, but and DDP's wrestling boots that apparently he bought from him just to keep this story going. I thought that was a lot of fun. That's the type of thing subtleties that you don't really see a lot in wrestling. So I don't know. Somebody was having fun with this and paying attention, perhaps because they had nothing else going on with some of these personalities. But finally, this culminates not in a match with Johnny B. Bad, because he had split for the WWF. Now it's the Booty Man taking his place at Uncensored. Loser leaves town.
And who is the Booty Man exactly?
Well, the Booty Man is, of course, Ed Leslie, otherwise known as everyone.
I mean, he had so many of them. I mean, he was the Butcher, he was Zodiac, he was the Disciple. I think he was just Ed Leslie. I remember that sort of became the thing in the late 90s where like Earthquake, he didn't want to be called Avalanche anymore, or the Shark. I'm not a shark. I'm a man. So they called him John Tenta, and then, Big Boss Man's the Boss, Guardian Angel, he became Ray Trailer. And that's exactly what happened with this.
It is a pattern. It does follow a pattern, most certainly. And Page loses that loser leaves town match, and we're not going to see him for a little bit. Not until May. He comes back thanks to a mysterious benefactor. Did we ever find out who the benefactor was?
No, I think they dropped that because then the NWO thing started, right?
Yeah, there wasn't even a retcon. Like, they never revisited it, because by the time people were asking themselves that question, he had already slowly become a babyface, and they didn't really feel there was any need to follow up on that storyline, so they just kind of left it alone.
It's one of those that you figure it just got swept up, like many things in the NWO starting out later that year. I mean, we're talking, this is May, and that's going to become hot and heavy by June and July. So, I mean, it certainly was not going to be a priority to resolve this mystery within the mid-card storytelling.
No.
I understand, but I'd heard that maybe they might try to use that to reunite he and Kimberly, that she might be the benefactor, that it was going to be Ted DiBiase. That would be his entrance to WCW. Might have made a degree of sense. I don't know.
That would have been a better use of DiBiase than the NWO.
Yeah, probably.
I'm thinking it probably would have been DiBiase, because he would have lost May. Was that In Your House when he would have lost to Austin and been out of the company?
Yeah, that was in May.
Yeah,
that was in May.
So it was the same month. So it could have been.
And he came back maybe a month earlier than that, because the thing is too, the other part of this is that the guy who basically got his spot was Johnny B. Bad from that feud, but Johnny B. Bad left for the WWF right about the same time that Dallas came back. So DDP basically just kind of slotted into a spot, a push that really was set for Mark Marrow that he left behind. And that might have lent to why he won the Battle Bowl at Slamboree.
Yes, which the Battle Bowl tournament, the last one they ever did, at least they made the right choice in putting DDP over. And we should mention he is using the Diamond Cutter now at this point. Still a heel, but that is his finisher, and that finish is getting over strong. I was trying to figure out when he started using it, and
you see, I cannot ever remember either. I think he was using it in 1995.
He was, yeah. It was in 95, and I almost wonder, was it late 94? That seems early.
Yeah, but the story is he got it from Johnny Ace when he was when John Laurinaitis was using it, the Ace Crusher, in All Japan, and he basically just either stole it or adopted it, whatever you want to call it.
Yeah, and the move evolved. I mean, it started out as sort of an awkward, modified bulldog in a way. Didn't look super impressive. And then he started doing like the over the shoulder cravat to apply it, and got better and better, more and more over.
And isn't there a story regarding a finishing move between Dallas and Triple H?
Oh, I think I know what you're talking about. So
where either he Diamond was asking permission to use the Ace Crusher, or Triple H was asking permission to use the Pedigree because they were both in the power plant.
I think like an early version of the Pedigree, when Triple H went to WWF, was like an Ace Crusher. I mean, very briefly. And did they call it the Pedigree? See, this is the kind of trivia that I'm like kind of into. It's super nerdy and no one else gives a shit, but I don't know, stuff like moves and finishers and how they evolve just seems sort of cool to me. But there is something to that where Triple H was kind of using the same move for like 5 minutes. And yeah, maybe they did talk about it amongst themselves.
It just shows to his rapport, because he was also traveling buddies with Steve Austin and Mick Foley. In the early 90s, so they had a very good relationship. I don't know if he had a good relationship with Mean Mark Callis. I'm pretty sure that The Undertaker was already out the door by the time Page was kind of getting set in WCW. But just like we were bringing up, he just had a lot of connections. It's like it was like a street hustler. Like he had everyone in his, I don't want to call it his back pocket, because that gives the sense that he didn't earn his push, but he just seemed to know exactly who to get in touch with if he needed something, and they were willing to return the favor because he was always ready to do something for these guys. And all these guys wound up becoming probably the most important wrestling stars of the 1990s.
Well, and I'm glad you brought that up, because I think we do need to touch on some of the criticism, and this is probably a good place to do it, because now he is getting that more steady push where he's, granted, still a heel, still a mid-carder, but appearing regularly on pay-per-views and just kind of working his way up the card.
And he was a heel, but he was more of like a cool heel. Mm-hmm, the NWO comes in and runs roughshod, and what happened is, even the Four Horsemen sort of like they were trying to keep sort of their heel motive, but they sort of worked as a counteract to the NWO in defense of WCW, whereas Page was just sort of like on his own island. And, I think he, if you ever heard Page on his podcast, or you've ever seen him map out matches, he's a very organized, very strategic, very methodical type of thinker.
Yeah.
For not only his matches, but for his angles. So he did this very purposely, knowing like, if I just keep doing my thing and I just treat the NWO like they don't exist, I'm going to find a way to get over. And that's exactly what happened.
Yeah, because when they do intersect, he is already over, and he already has a catalog of decent work he can point to, and he does have, as he said, these relationships. He's friends and neighbors with Eric Bischoff. I think they live just a couple houses apart, literally. And people dog him for that, just saying how, he was a brown noser. He just networked and politicked his way to the top.
I think they also go back to the AWA days because of Bischoff being there. And the funny story is that Bischoff's told us before, is like the first time they met, they almost got into a fight.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, that's right. And they ended up becoming friends out of that encounter. Yeah. So it's not like he just became friends with the boss because he was the boss. They did have a history. I mean, Eric Bischoff was just a lowly broadcaster in AWA at the time.
Yeah, selling meat out of a truck in Minneapolis.
Selling meat out of a truck, as the story goes.
If it wasn't for Hulk Hogan, Eric Bischoff would be still selling meat from a truck in Minneapolis.
I love that line.
I know. I mean, that's a Hulk Hogan classic right there, a Hollywood Hogan classic.
Yes.
But it's just sort of like, I hate that criticism so much because show me any line of work where it is purely a meritocracy, that everybody just rises to the top on the basis of their abilities, and it's just this perfect democratic system. I mean, it's always, to a degree, who you know. You have to know somebody. You have to make relationships. And that's just kind of how you demonstrate, hey, I am a hard worker. You can count on me. You can have confidence in me because you know me. It's not that, oh, I'm just going to do a favor for my friends. It's, I've got a million guys out here. I don't know who to push. Everybody wants a push. They're all professional wrestlers. So, you know, this is a line of work that, let's face it, attracts a lot of grifters. And I'm going to put my faith in somebody I can trust. So if you are an Eric Bischoff or a Dusty Rhodes, you will naturally go back to someone like a Diamond Dallas Page who has put in the work. And yes, he is friends with you, but he's friends with you because he's a good guy. You know him. He is genuine, unlike some of these other characters who you're just not sure about. And yeah, you get a push out of that. Great. It's just kind of the way of the world. I don't know why people single out, or at the time at least, I think that history has kind of favored DDP and where he's at now. But just this sort of IWC criticism from this time frame, this mid-90s, as he's going into the push that he would get, saying, oh, well, it should have been this guy, it should have been that guy. Why Page? He's so old. They need to be pushing new talent. Sure. Fine, but tell me who was more deserving, who had worked harder. Who else was there? I mean, you could pick a name out of a hat, I guess, but he's good as someone else.
And he wrestled those guys all the time. He wrestled Eddie Guerrero for the U.S. title in one of his, highest profile matches at Starrcade.
Yes.
He wrestled Chris Benoit, like you mentioned many times. We'll talk about that later. He wrestled Raven. He wrestled. He had a lengthy feud with even Bret Hart when he came into WCW. Now Bret Hart was a legend, but there were a lot of mid card acts that he worked with on the way up. The other thing about Page is that as the years went along, it wasn't like his talents were eroding because of his age, and that he was getting better. Like when you would watch him and from 1995 and then go to 1996, his matches were just more entertaining. We were also in an age where the finishers and the run-ins and the surprises really became the big draw for crowds. So people would just pop like crazy for the Diamond Cutter. It got over it's just so strange. It's not like the Diamond Cutter just all of a sudden started happening. It was just one of those things that just evolved slowly into a must-see type of thing. I guess a lot of people would compare it with the Canadian Destroyer for Petey Williams. When he was in TNA, people don't really care they know Petey Williams is talented, but they want to see the Canadian Destroyer. And that's kind of what happened with DDP. The Diamond Cutter was an end-all be-all type of move. It was it was like what the Tombstone is in America. When it hits you, you're done. So people really enjoyed that.
It's kind of one of those 4-quadrant finishers, if you will. And now I've obligated myself to coming up with 4 quadrants.
That's a good way of putting it. Yeah.
But it looks good. You can pop it off from any position. There's no limitations in terms of, oh, this guy's too big, so I can't do the move.
It looks devastating.
It looks devastating. Yeah, it looks convincing.
That's the thing that Randy Orton's been doing. Now, you can hit it out anywhere, or all the different variations. And I remember in that Slamboree cage thing, he's popping it off when guys are I think hanging from the cage or something, and I think Kidman drops and he just hits him with it. And even there's another thing I wanted to mention about the Diamond Cutter, about hitting it out anywhere, is that there'd been a lot of times on this show we'd start talking about DDP, and I'm well, in post, I'm let's cut this out because we know we're eventually going to do a DDP episode down the line. So sometimes if I needed to cut anything out of the show for length, I'd end up cutting DDP stories, so almost backlogging them. So there was one that Tim, he talked about in our first or second episode, I think, but it never aired. And you were
Yes.
talking about how you guys were just talking about how he wrestled Eddie Guerrero a lot. And I think there was a match that Tim had saw on TV with Eddie Guerrero and DDP. And
it was on WCW Saturday Night.
Yeah,
Yes.
so you must have seen it too, Andrew.
Yes. It's a YouTube favorite. It's one of those, like, you know, the other one that's on YouTube. I mean, there's many things with Eddie that became popular, you know, post-mortem, but
I was gonna
one
say,
was
this
him.
was a 1998 Tim Capel favorite, but go ahead.
It's one where he reversed the rock bottom into a roll-up. And, like, nobody had ever seen that before. It just kind of spoke to, like, how blessed of a talent Eddie Guerrero was, you know. I mean, maybe Dallas was just smart to work with really talented people that he knew could make him look good, but the move that sort of turned that into a diamond cutter when he wrestled Eddie was really, it was like a spectacular move. And Dallas has talked about it before too.
Yeah, so he's got Eddie in the power bomb position, about to lift him, and he throws up the diamond cutter sign. So you're like, what's he going for here? How's he going to hit the diamond cutter? It looks like he's going to power bomb. Sure enough, picks him up. Eddie's on DDP's shoulders, and you're like, I don't see how this is going to turn into a diamond cutter. But he flips Eddie, and I can't even really describe how this works, because he has to flip him sort of to the side and catches him on the way down in one smooth motion into the diamond cutter. Now, Paige has talked about how Eddie did like 90% of the work here, that they had a conversation before the match. Finish is going to be the diamond cutter, and Eddie says, hey, why don't you hit it on me out of a power bomb position? And DDP's like, that's impossible. I don't even know how that would work. And Eddie says, just put me up like you're going to hit a power bomb. I'll take care of the rest. Like, what do you mean? How's this going to – this is not going to look right. To your point, Andrew, DDP is one of these guys, wants everything methodically planned out in advance, mapped out, rehearsed, go over every spot. And Eddie's saying, no, do like you're going to hit a power bomb. I'll take care of it. So – and it looks spectacular. Could not have gone better. One of those moments where after he hits it, he kind of marks out for himself, which always makes me mark out too. And Randy Orton does the same thing. Like, I'm thinking back to that, the first really spectacular one, which was
Evan Bourne. Yeah.
From the shooting star press as he's coming down, Orton pops up and catches him in the RKO, and he flips out again, just going crazy. Can't believe he hit the move. No one else can believe he hit the move. So just one of those moments that, in a way, I guess it can take you out of the match, but who really cares, because it's so cool. And this is what we watch wrestling for. Just perfect. And yeah, that was in like 98. So just a random throwaway Saturday night match. Probably not a lot of people saw at the time, and I'm so glad that people have gotten to see it now and really appreciate. There was so much wrestling back then, and you never knew what you were going to get week to week, just in terms of matches, and one of those hidden gems for so very long. But Eddie Guerrero, a big component in Paige's success, working with Eddie throughout the end of 96, really. They had a decent little feud, and it's at that Starrcade. That was like a tournament finals for the U.S. Championship, right? Something along those lines.
I can't remember.
Yeah, it was. And then didn't like Six end up leaving with the belt, kind of like held it hostage?
Yes.
Oh, you're right. And then Eddie had to have the ladder match, and Eddie talked before about how he had never been in a ladder match before, so he didn't know how to. He didn't know if he could have a good match, which is hilarious because, like, I don't think Eddie Guerrero ever had a bad match in his career.
I know, it's unreal. And it was the NWO interfering in that match between DDP and Eddie at Starrcade that really kickstarts the feud between DDP and the NWO. They had been kind of sort of courting him throughout the end of 96. All signs pointing to DDP is going to be the next member, the next guy to defect and join the NWO, right? It is at that Nitro. It was in the Superdome, right, Andrew?
Yes, I was there.
In New Orleans. So you saw this.
This was the lead up to Sold Out. And they give him the shirt. And, you know, it's just I will say this. This was the first time ever that, you know, because the NWO at that before Starrcade, I don't think had lost a match. Like, everybody was heavily protected. The NWO was basically just like literally running. I know it's used a lot when they talk about the vernacular of like WCW storylines, but like NWO was literally dominating WCW, like in every segment. So the Outsiders come out after he wins against some jobber, and they give him the NWO shirt. And he's celebrating, and when Kevin Nash's back is turned, when he's got his hands up, he gives Scott Hall the diamond cutter. Place explodes. Nash charges him. He drops the top rope down so that Nash spills over, and you know, it's the first time that someone had actually turned away the NWO. Yeah. You know, so some people would say Jeff Jarrett, but that I find that hard to believe. Remember when Jeff Jarrett he said, like, I was offered the NWO, but I don't want to take the easy way out or something. That was yeah. Oh, but no, it was Page was like the one that they were like heavily recruiting, and he said no, I'd rather fight against you.
Yeah.
Yes.
He completes his face turn. That was just the shock heard around the world. When he hits that diamond cutter on Hall, like, that pop is just off the charts.
Yeah. No one had laid out the NWO like that. Sting had not turned yet. Sting was still like literally hovering in the middle, so nobody really knew. This was the first time that somebody really like got the leg up on not just the New World Order, but, you know, Scott Hall and Kevin Nash. You know. Yeah,
no one got over on them, and for this, of all people who, you know, people are kind of wanting to see him as a proper babyface. You know, he's in that very tweener type of role. He's got the super hot finish now. Everybody knows what the diamond cutter is and goes up for it. And it's like, shit, here we go. Another guy going to join the NWO or get his ass kicked by him. And it's anything but. It's this dude that is on a slow burn acceleration here. From there on, it is just it is going to be a wild ride. And I think this is where we ought to take our break because business is about to pick up.
Yeah, I was just going to say, let's take a break, and then we'll come back and we'll talk about your other favorite diamond cutter moment.
Yes, my other favorite diamond cutter moment coming up. So, break time here at the Diamond Mine. Take a load off. You know, relax, refresh with a Dr. Slice. Join us right back here. We got some bills to pay, and we will be back.
Self-high five. DDP. Too cool.
Promotional consideration paid for by the following.
Hey, pro wrestling announcer Kevin Kelly here. I want to make sure you are all subscribed to all the great feeds here at Place to Be Nation. It's really easy to do. Just head to iTunes or your preferred podcatcher app today and search and subscribe to the Place to Be Nation wrestling feed, which of course includes the full archives of the Kevin Kelly Show, the Place to Be Nation pod feed, and the Pro Wrestling Only feed. Subscribe, listen, and then rate us and leave feedback today. And be sure to give Justin your true thoughts. I mean, don't hold back. After all, he is kind of a jerk. Just listen to Scott.
Place to Be Nation's JT Rosero and Chad Campbell here. We want to let you know that we have a ton of great podcasts available to you on iTunes, Stitcher, Google Play, and PlaceToBeNation.com. We offer them to you on two great feeds. On the Place to Be Nation wrestling feed, we bring you the Mothership, the Place to Be podcast, along with Main Event, Survey Says, the Monday Night Wars, and our monthly pay-per-view reaction show, as well as Jeff Learns Wrestling. In addition to these full-length shows, we also deliver special network podcasts and pod blasts on topics old and new.
Over on the Pro Wrestling Only feed, we dive deep inside the wrestling business with a stacked army of experts leading the way. The feed features potpourri shows such as This Week in Wrestling, Greetings from Allentown, Match of the Week podcast, and the Military Industrial Suplex. We also have shows that focus intently on certain topics like Through the Years, Worldcast, Strong Style History, Strong Style Story, and Mount Olympus. Plus, the feed has the full archives of legendary shows like Titans of Wrestling, Where the Big Boys Play, Letters from Center Stage, and Letters from Kayfabe, plus much more. And on our very popular Place to Be Nation Pop podcast feed, we offer such great shows as Talkin' Pop, the Glenn Butler Podcast Hour Spectacular, NBA Team, PTBN Play, Sunday Groove, Breaking Balls, and Lucha Undead.
As well as a veritable podcast heaven for comics fans.
With the hard-traveling fanboys, Sellers Points, Todd Weber's Conversations, Geek and Sassy, and Marvel Age Podcasts.
You can find all of these current shows, plus archives of our past podcasts, including The Kevin Kelly Show, as well by subscribing to both feeds on iTunes. And while there, be sure to rate and leave feedback today. All these shows, plus others, available at PlayStation.com, where we cover pro wrestling, sports, movies, comics, plus in-depth stretch projects, and more. Be sure to support our site by using PlayStation.com/Amazon when doing your online shopping, and download our free PTB Vintage Vault Refresh ebooks via the links on our site. We also want to thank our friends at Boneheads Wing Bar in West Warwick, Rhode Island, and Fall River, Massachusetts, and thehistoryofwrestling.com. Be sure to follow us on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and Tumblr as well. PlayStation.com, the only place to be in your pop culture world.
Talk about buying.
It's the official WCW MasterCard with 12 exclusive designs.
Personally, I carry the Metro Girls.
You get merchandise discounts, automatic entry into sweepstakes, an insider's newsletter, and other exclusive benefits.
You get to pick the hottest wrestling card in history.
Show the world where you stand. Choose your card. Order the official WCW MasterCard. Call now, 1-800-WCW-CARD.
Yo, it's me. It's me. It's DDP.
Ain't that right, Canyon?
Bada bang!
From the penthouse to the outhouse, Survey Says is back, heading into the power plant, putting in reps. Tim Capel here, Andy, Savage, Scum, Helene, Andrew, Scum, Riche. We are the Triad. We are celebrating the life and times of Diamond Dallas Page. And before we get back to business here, we have some administrative matters at hand. That, of course, being our Survey Says Fan of the Month Club. Now, Andy, I have just recently been conversing with a gentleman who let me know he was a fan of our program and some of the other podcasts on Place to Be. He just kind of randomly hit me up on Facebook Messenger, which you're always a little bit like, what's this about? Who is this person? Do I really want to get into this conversation? Like, this is going to be awkward or weird. And I can tell you, was not like that at all.
Was it Ralphus?
It was not Ralphus.
Man, I keep hoping every time you talk to somebody, it's Ralphus.
I'm not convinced that Ralphus is still alive, unfortunately. I just, someone does need to get to the bottom of that. Perhaps someone already has gotten to the bottom of that, and we're just unaware.
Don't bring me down on Ralphus Day.
Yeah, no, we're gonna keep things upbeat here. This is our second birthday. Staying positively Page. You know, this individual I'm referring to that I had a great conversation with on Facebook Messenger was, you know, I need not fear anything going in. As a matter of fact, his name is Mick Price, and we got to talking some wrestling. His fandom and his interests pretty similar to us, where he got into it Attitude Era, this kind of 1997-98 time frame, so we could totally relate on that level. One of those deals where we kind of lost track of time, didn't realize we'd been chatting for a good 20-40 minutes, and it was like, well, look at that. We're just fast friends now. So I kind of told him I was going to do this, but I'll go ahead and make it official. Welcome to the Survey Says Fan of the Month Club, Mick Price. Keep listening. We'll keep chatting. And, always cool to make a good friend, make a new friend, and someone who is not an awkward, strange, IWC troll, which we know there are a lot out there.
Is he your good friend like the Equalizer?
He's my good friend.
Yeah.
Oh, well, speaking of past editions of Survey Says, our last episode concerned WCW Road Wild 1999, where we asked the question, was it worked shit or was it shoot shit that Dennis Rodman was deposited into in the porta potty, his match with Macho Man Randy Savage? Don't know that we got an answer to that question, but during our break, Andrew brought this to my attention. On Eric Bischoff's podcast, 83 Weeks, they have covered this time frame, this August 1999 time period, which includes Road Wild 1999, this being Bischoff's exit from the company, his last month with WCW before he was sent packing. Of course, he would come back. I have not listened to the episode, but I'm so glad Andrew pointed it out, and I thought I would steer folks in that direction. Perhaps we will get an answer to that question. We're going to stay on the case and see what comes of that, but I do encourage you to check it out, unless it is bad, and I will deny that I ever brought it up. So, with that said, let's get back to business here, talking DDP. From here on out, we are flying high. This is all going to be like hot moments, big, juicy stuff from the career of Diamond Dallas Page. What's more important is that this is leading to the feud of the year of 1997, arguably the feud of WCW, that being Diamond Dallas Page versus Macho Man Randy Savage, himself freshly turned and in the New World Order. Starts off really at Uncensored. And Andy, this is a segment we did not talk about on our Uncensored rundown. There was a segment, an interview with DDP and Savage, where Savage basically reveals that Kimberly posed for Playboy. And they show the pictures, which are strategically covered with NWO graffiti. Kimberly comes out, looks like she's been maybe roughed up in the back, and Miss Elizabeth is doing the whole mean girl thing that she did when she was a heel. And this is an intense segment. I don't know if you guys have seen it recently, but kind of uncomfortable, looking at it through 2018 eyes. Do y'all have any recollections of this angle?
Yeah, because that's almost like, weren't they going to do that with Flair and Mr. Perfect, and they were like promising to show these photos with Elizabeth? It's almost like that, but like now in the adult era of like wrestling, they took it like a little bit further.
Yeah, they kind of
actually went for it.
It seemed like, they were maybe drawing from that as inspiration, again, with Liz involved in this too. And I mean, it's the type of thing that if they did it today, number one, they wouldn't do it like this at all. But if Kimberly was involved, Miss Elizabeth was involved, you figure they do like a mixed tag match at some point, right?
Yeah.
And even back then, I think folks were expecting that to happen, but it never does. Paige gets ambushed by Savage at that show, knocked out. There's a great little moment where Savage, he's like saying what he's about to do, and the camera's picking everything up, and he has him about to lift Paige into the air. I'm gonna give him a pile driver, which he doesn't. Kimberly interrupts, so it ends not as tragically as it could have. He doesn't get pile driver on the concrete, but a real hot way to kick off that rivalry.
And don't forget, Paige is in the center. Like Diamond Dallas is in it too.
Mm-hmm.
Like it was like a duo photo shoot. But I don't think that's why people were buying the magazine.
No, perhaps not. No, not at the time. This leads to the match between Paige and Savage at Spring Stampede '97. There's a great story that Andrew, I think I'll let you do the honors. So, how does the finish to this match come about?
Well, I'm gonna let you do the voice because you do it better than me.
Oh.
But if you can,
I'll try. Yeah.
But well, this is the first match that they have against one another. Not only that, it was one of the ones where Hogan basically didn't have to wrestle. So, but based on his commitments, so they decided to go last with Paige and Savage. It was the main event of Spring Stampede, and so they're getting ready for the match. And the funny thing about Savage and Dallas is that their methods are very similar. They like to have everything very meticulously mapped out.
Yeah.
Even Bischoff has said that when they got together for a feud, he thought that they couldn't. He had some doubts of whether they could work together because they thought they would their personalities would clash, but it was the exact opposite. Like they were like right on the same page, but they didn't really know. Like just like most WCW shows, they didn't know how to finish it. So Arn Anderson was working as an agent and asked Randy what he wanted to do. Basically, it was his call of who wins and who loses. And he's lacing up his boots, he's tightening them up, and then he tells Arn what?
Arn, think I want to take the diamond cutter.
He said, I want to take the diamond cutter tonight. And I
think I'm going to take the diamond cutter. And that's going to be the finish.
And the thing about the match, too, is that it's like, I mean, by WCW standards, we've seen some pretty crazy stuff, a lot of blood in the NWA days, but that had been kind of like bleached out in the Bischoff years. This is a very like violent, like gruesome, nonstop brawl between Savage and Paige. And Savage takes liberties. He does not quit. He like beats the crap out of every referee. He is Macho kind of did this when he was feuding with Flair, when he took Elizabeth went to Flair, where he was like he was like a lunatic. He was like he was like crazed, and he sort of has that same energy, manic energy, in this match where he's the villain, he's the heel, but he's also like batshit insane.
Yeah,
and
I love NWO Randy Savage. Yeah.
And you get that sense the whole match. But the thing that's so brilliant about not only the match but their feud is that as crazy as it looks, there's a reason for everything. Like they have everything mapped out. They know exactly where they want to go. And because Savage was willing to take the loss, it made it mean more because it put Dallas over big. Like he was already a star by the time he was feuding with the NWO. But when he got a pinfall on Savage, that turned Diamond Dallas Page into, oh, he's just a WCW guy that hit big too. Like Diamond Dallas Page is a bona fide wrestling superstar.
And cemented the diamond cutter as well as just
because he didn't kick out of it. Yes,
didn't kick out. Nobody had kicked out up to that point. There's no delayed pinfall or anything. No shenanigans, no bullshit, just straight up hits the diamond cutter, pins him. And I think that did a lot for the move, for Paige. Just such an important moment, pivotal in this huge hot babyface run of DDP. And that is going to be the story of his 1997, really, is this Paige with this feud with Randy Savage. Just seemed like it was nonstop, and they didn't have matches on a lot of consecutive pay-per-views the way we think of wrestling feuds traditionally.
Now they feuded all the way through. Like it was one of those things where it was such a blood feud that, like, in every promo they pretty much mentioned each other every time, but they didn't wrestle each other all the time. Like there was patience you put through. You know, patience was a virtue, so they made sure to at least space it out a little bit before they blew it off. What surprised me at the end of the day about Dallas and Randy is that in actuality they didn't actually wrestle each other that many times, which makes the matches that they did have seem much more important. You know, I mean, unless someone can historically correct me, I want to say on Nitro they may have wrestled each other once or twice, but not often.
They did, but in '97, it was not a straight one-on-one match. We have, and I can't remember if this was between the Stampede match and the rematch that they had at Great American Bash, which we gave a lot of love to on our Great American Bash episode with Jordan Duncan. I think we ended up voting it. Was that our number one or number two? I think it was our number one, and it ended up by the point total. It wasn't any of our favorite match, but we all had it so high that I think it finished number one in our Great American Bash rank and file. So good stuff there. But anyway, there was a match on Nitro between Savage and La Parka. You can't see me doing air quotes, but
this is actually one of my favorite DDP moments of all time.
And what works so well about this is watching at home, you don't think it's necessarily out of the ordinary that Randy Savage would be wrestling La Parka, only because WCW did shit like this all the time. You know, you would have just a random, like, Chris Jericho versus Scott Hall match, and just these kind of exhibition nothing matches with top guys against either, you know, jobbers or some of the cruiserweights or what have you.
Yeah, and the booking reasoning they used storyline wise was that when they wanted uncensored 97, I think the stipulation was that the NWO could challenge for a title anytime they wanted to.
True. Yeah.
So it gave that sense of, oh, the NWO is going to challenge any random wrestler anytime they want. That's why we got a lot of Scott Hall, Chris Jericho matches.
Yeah, that was you're right, a fallout from that stipulation where they won at the main event of Uncensored in '97, which was such a shit show of a match. But in any case, this La Parka match that's going on, Savage goes up for the elbow drop. La Parka gets the knees up, and it's like, okay, he blocked the elbow drop. How about that? Unmasks. It's Diamond Dallas Page, hits the Diamond Cutter, gets the win. So I don't know how kayfabe that one goes into the record books, win for La Parka or DDP, but man, he pulled it off. Doing the dance and everything. He made a very convincing La Parka. Yeah, got to be a top moment for sure for any DDP fan. And really in Nitro history, that was the first time anything like that had really been done. Think of like how The Undertaker would sort of cosplay as Kane on
that was a year later, yeah.
Yeah, those 98 Raws.
Yes.
So anyway, we get the rematch at Great American Bash, which we've kind of already talked about on Survey Says.
Great match, yeah.
Great match. And this, to me, is like the weakest in their series. And even having said that, it's a phenomenal match. So, and this is one where, again, you got Savage going all out, taking out referees, gives Mickey J a pile driver.
Jesus, I forgot about that.
I don't know why that tickles me so much, but it's just so overkill for a ref bump, I guess. So, yeah, pop for that. Savage gets the win there with a little help from Scott Hall running in. And this leads to some tag stuff with Savage and Hall versus DDP and a partner of his choice, typically Luger. that's sort of the program they're running with that summer. Going into that the last Clash of the Champions, Andy joked with me before break, one of my favorite diamond cutters. So it's DDP and Luger versus Savage and Hall in the main event there. Match is kind of okay, whatever. But before that, there's a segment where Paul Gilmartin, host of the, what do you call it, an interstitial show on TBS called Dinner and a Movie, does a mental health podcast today. What's it called? The mental illness happy hour is his podcast today. Interesting stuff there. But at this time, he's the host of Dinner and a Movie, and he and the chef, I think the chef's name was Claude, they have swerved everyone by going NWO at this Clash of the Champions.
Wait, Dinner and a Movie went NWO?
Dinner and a Movie went NWO.
Wow.
Times
are hard.
His co-host was not there. What was her name?
Annabelle, I think.
Annabelle? Yeah. Annabelle? I think he had a couple of different co-hosts. But in any case, she was not there. But Paul Gilmartin, cuts a heel promo at this Clash of the Champions. They were like celebrating the NWO's birthday, and there was a birthday cake. That was when the reveal came that they had turned. DDP does not take too kindly to this, comes out, confronts Paul Gilmartin, who starts begging off, and Paige drops him with the diamond cutter. And I got to tell you, Paul Gilmartin sells this diamond cutter better than a lot of the wrestlers did. He goes down, and he's told the story on his podcast, actually, that this was incredibly painful. He was like feeling it for the next week or so. Had to basically crawl to his car and drive out of there. He was in so much pain.
Oh my God.
His glasses exploded immediately on impact. I mean, he eats shit and the glasses just shatter. And I mean, this was all like he agreed to it, but I don't think he really rehearsed or necessarily knew how to take the move. It feels like typical WCW fashion. They didn't really prep them maybe as well as they should have. Came off looking good on TV, though. It's one of those segments, doesn't get talked about, but maybe look for it because it's pretty cool. It's pretty funny. I mean, I feel bad for the guy, but he certainly seems to be over it now. But yeah, and he described it. He's not a wrestling guy, Paul Gilmartin, so he tells the story as so what happens is that he puts you in like a headlock and falls while walking away. Pretty good description for a diamond cutter, I guess. So that's in August. We've kind of skipped ahead in our 97 timeline. But that takes us into the last match in the 97 trilogy with Savage, that being Halloween Havoc. I really love this match. What about you guys?
I think that's like the best one, but the worst finish, I think.
Yeah.
Oh, the finish is awful.
Sense, yeah.
They don't know if it's Sting who attacks Paige, which knocks him out for good for the 10 count. Because it was first of all, it was a Las Vegas sudden death match. Was that the name of the?
I think that's what they called it. Yeah.
Yeah, it was last man standing match. And
right. That's the last man standing.
And Hogan dressed as Sting attacks Paige.
Right.
But we never really found out if it was Hogan, right? Like they never really said later on, but it was very strongly suggested it was him.
I think they did make it clear because the next night was it the next night or shortly thereafter, DDP and Hogan have a singles match on Nitro.
Okay.
Which was pretty good. And it was one of those, like, you could tell Hogan was game. You know, sometimes he was, sometimes he wasn't. Sort of depending on who he was working with. I guess he liked DDP because it's a pretty well-worked match. And a non-finish, of course. But Hogan gives DDP a diamond cutter on the world title after the match in a neat spot. And Hogan does a pretty good diamond cutter. So, but yeah, I would agree with you, Andy. It's maybe the best worked match in their series with the worst finish. And it just kind of sucks because after Savage put DDP over in that first match, he really didn't again. Like, he kind of won the feud in a way. It's not like they really were keeping track of these things, but DDP, like, didn't get another win over him, which was too bad. There wasn't like a rubber match situation.
But the most important thing is, by the time Page was done with Savage, was he better off from feuding? And the answer is yes.
Yes.
Like, I mean, he was way over. He won the U.S. title off of Kurt Hennig at Starrcade, and that's sort of what started that run.
Do you guys think that... It seemed like for a while they were promoting Flair and Hennig going into that Starrcade. I think they even announced it was going to be a cage match. But Flair was hurt, and they had to scrap it. But I wonder if they were ever planning to do that match in the first place. Like, was it always going to be DDP and Hennig, and they just did like a red herring with Flair? Or did they really intend to do Flair and Hennig, and where would that have left DDP on that Starrcade? You know?
Yeah, because they'd already done that match like 3 pay-per-views in a row, and then you'd think it would be weird to leave DDP off of that huge show.
Are you saying that Starrcade 97 was poorly booked? Is that what you're trying to tell me?
I would never suggest that.
Well, remember too, like, Savage and Page, for the most part, you know, they would trade jabs, of course, you know, when they crossed paths, but for the most part, they were pretty much done as a feud. So I remember that Savage was inserted into like a random 6-man match.
That's true, yeah.
In Starrcade. Nash, I mean, let's just go through the whole thing. Like, Nash Giant didn't happen because Nash, I think his father had a heart attack.
He had a heart attack.
Yeah.
I mean, he didn't, but he said he did.
Yeah, he had a case of joberitis. And so Giant had to beat up Scott Hall, who didn't wrestle either. So, yeah, no outsiders. Ric Flair, Flair Hennig was in the books. What it was, though, is that he had like an equilibrium, like an ear equilibrium problem, and he couldn't wrestle. So, no Flair. But remember, too, Eric and Flair were like on the outs big time. So I can very easily believe that they just said, you know, Flair, you're off the show. We'll just use Page to win the U.S. title off of Kurt Hennig.
It's just weird to me that if they, let's say they do a Flair Hennig match, and yeah, you need something for DDP. Savage wasn't booked. I wonder if they were going to do a blow off to DDP and Savage at Starrcade, if that was ever in the cards. I mean, that show was already looking pretty loaded. If things had gone according to plan. So I don't know. It just seems like there's a world where he doesn't win that U.S. title from Hennig on Starrcade, and that's a big moment in his career too. Because he was holding down that upper mid-card fort going into 98 as the U.S. champion. So, I mean, this is when he gets involved with the ongoing Raven and Benoit feud, and there were people who said that he politicked his way into that and lobbied Bischoff to like steal the feud from Benoit because he saw how it was getting over. Again, all this kind of bullshit IWC stuff that doesn't matter anymore.
You guys have already touched on that. Like,
yeah, it's like I've kind of was a DDP fan, then I wasn't, a DDP fan for a while, and I think maybe I bought into too much of that internet rumors and how he played politics and stuff. I've come back around. Like, I've come like full circle, and I recently read that he was responsible for getting the guy who was Glacier, I forget his name, but he ended up getting him the job in WCW. So if he was playing politics, why would he extend out offers like that and give people favors back?
And he was
Ray Floyd, right?
Thank you. He was wanting
Ray Lloyd, yes.
Yeah.
He was wanting to do like a karate gimmick and kind of merge the two into one kind of character. And DDP was friends with him, and he went to Bischoff and was like, "Hey, why don't you use this guy for like a karate gimmick?"
Huh, I never knew that.
And so if he was such an asshole, I mean, and just wanted to get to the top, I mean, why would he, do favors back for other people? It just doesn't make sense, Yeah, like, I think he's just like a straight up good guy.
I think it's easy to look at him, and from the way he was described, he was always a pretty genuine guy, but maybe it came off as suspect. Like, I could see how, especially in the wrestling industry, a person of that character could come across as maybe glad-handing or phony. And I think in DDP's case, it was all just the real deal. And it took a while for anybody to realize that. There's so many cynics and people who've gotten burned and have a chip on their shoulder that you're not necessarily going to take somebody at their word at face value. And it just took a while for that to really bear out for DDP. I mean, look at where he's at today, and speaks for itself.
The one weird thing about Page was that he was in a situation where he was a superstar and he was stabilized as established as like a big time guy. But the weird thing about WCW was that especially for Page, specifically for Page's position, was that there were actually maybe like a few different tiers. It wasn't lower, middle, and top. It was more in the vein of like Page was in that top tier, but he wasn't in the Hogan, Savage, Nash, Sting, Piper tier. Like, that was a higher level. Like, that was the tippity top. Like, they had already, and Luger too. Like, they had a point where those guys were just, they were getting the biggest deals. They were the biggest stars. They were the ones that Eric Bischoff was going to gravitate towards if times got tough. And Dallas was still like a notch below that. We'll talk about that when we get to 99, because that definitely showed when he won the title. But he was still at that point where he was established, but for mid-carders like Chris Benoit and Raven and Eddie Guerrero and Rey Mysterio and Chris Jericho, wrestling Diamond Dallas Page was like a legitimate step up. So yeah. I don't think they looked at it as like, oh, they're stealing my heat. I think they looked at it as an opportunity. I mean, Raven, that was his best moments when he was feuding with Page. After that was over and then Goldberg squashed him, I mean, Raven's career in WCW practically died.
That is true. Yeah, there is something to the idea that DDP could float between that upper card main event scene and the mid card, where no, he wasn't one of those tippy top sort of guys, but he could hang with them when needed, but hold his own in the undercard, the mid card, wherever you're at, just to pop a rating for a TV show, or be in a good position on a pay-per-view, and be that mid card gateway. If you.
And remember, this was right around when Thunder started. So
yeah.
Now Saturday Night was sort of like, it really mellowed down into like just, either big time wrestlers getting easy jobber wins or just one kind of random name after another. And Thunder became the place. Now, Bischoff has said many, many times that he signed Bret Hart because he needed more talent for Thunder, for the production. Yeah. But for guys like Benoit, Booker T, even we didn't mention yet in all of this. For Page, like I remember many, many times seeing Diamond Dallas Page on Thunder, just having match. And also, we forgot to mention this too in the last Savage match. That was the debut of the famous rib tape that he became almost personified with, like in when we got into the late 90s.
Yeah. So now he's got the taped ribs. He's wearing jeans. He's that very blue collar working man's. This is the people's champion, Diamond Dallas Page. This is the character where, again, I've just really started regularly watching WCW, but this is who I responded to, and especially in that Raven feud, because I hated Raven and really took to Chris Benoit. And when they teamed up against the Flock, that was just like a early holy shit moment for me as a pretty young, marquee fan that I was. And I will say that it was probably, whether he politicked his way into the feud or not, neither here nor there. It was smart being positioned where he was in 98, because I think that got more eyes on the feud and on DDP when they're not going up against the heavy competition of probably what's going on at the height of the Monday Night Wars. They're not top of the hour stacked main event versus main event where you're flipping channels. You could probably, if you are watching both programs, see the entirety of like a DDP Saturn match, DDP random Flock member match, and shenanigans with Raven, whatever's going on in that feud. You wouldn't miss it because you wanted to flip over to what was going on the other station. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
It was very watchable, and it wasn't up against really, really stiff competition. That being my recollection anyway, as someone who did flip channels constantly. So I thought that was pretty cool.
And then, you get through that era in 98, and then, you had Hogan and Rodman in 97, and they had the big, now you got to remember this, in 97 and 98, Dennis Rodman was, this was in the NBA days. Dennis Rodman was big time. Like, he was probably the most well-known for many, he was probably the most controversial athlete in sports.
Yeah.
And he was also on the world champion Bulls in 97 and 98. And, 99, when you were talking about Road Wild, he was getting, like, he barely played for the Lakers. Like, his star, the shine was gone. But in 97, but those 2 years before, he was big time. And in 97, they had, I think it was Luger and the Giant against Rodman and Hogan. So that's a big spot. That's a huge push. It's like it shows how much Eric depended on those talents, and he felt like Giant and Luger were appropriate baby faces. And then they went with the next year it was Page, and who else was the other guy?
Karl Malone.
Karl Malone.
Mm-hmm.
And to try to bounce off of the basketball feud that they had in the finals. What did you think of Eric going with, because he could have gone with other baby faces, but what did you think of him going with Page in that role to feud with Hogan, but almost in an indirect way, because there was more of a celebrity, because the Jay Leno came into the mix a month later at Road Wild.
I just think that speaks to what a vote of confidence it is that Page gets the nod here, because Eric knew he could count on DDP to basically get Karl Malone ready for this, and to a lesser extent, even more of an extent, really.
Karl Malone looked like a pro wrestler.
Oh, yeah.
He had a chiseled body, long arms. He looked like he could mess somebody up.
And he took it seriously, too. You could tell that he was a wrestling fan.
I believe like a day or so before the show, his mother passed away.
Oh, shit.
Karl Malone.
I do recall something like that. Yeah, wow.
Took it very seriously. Yes, he did.
So he would have some very mixed emotions going into a pretty big moment.
Now Page also trained Jay Leno temporarily for the match, and he swears by that Jay Leno worked hard to get ready for that match. The Tonight Show stuff where Bischoff and Hogan took over the show, that was a great PR for them, for sure.
Yeah.
But I remember a lot of people saying, "Oh God, Karl Malone now Jay Leno. What the hell is this?
What are we doing?" Yeah.
Yeah, a lot of people turned. A lot of fanfare. A lot of fans just turned on that, and I don't know if it's necessarily fair. I do remember the match being really awful, but I mean, great opportunity for Dallas.
I will say this for that Leno match. On that card, that is 1998 Road Wild, so we just did 99 this year before that. Rewatched that show recently for the Place to Be Nation live watch group chat. The crowd is absolutely dead, comatose throughout that entire show until the main event. Those bikers were feeling it for Jay Leno. I don't know why, but he actually woke the crowd up. And you know what? It's I won't say a well-worked match. It is a well-structured match.
Yeah, it was planned out.
It was planned out very, very well, where you've got DDP and Hogan as the glue, keeping things under control, keeping everybody in order where they need to be. And, Page went above and beyond, as you said, by helping to train Jay Leno, getting him ready for that. Something that would not take place today. I feel like any sort of celebrity involvement would be very, very micromanaged, have a lot of oversight. And from all indications, this was Eric Bischoff saying, hey, we're booking the match. DDP, train him, get him ready, and just left him to it, which is nuts to think about. But it basically worked. And no, Jay Leno is not a convincing professional wrestler, but it is what it is. I mean, it's 1998. You want celebrity involvement. You want to get eyes on your product. So whatever, fine. This is not the most egregious thing that...
And it's not the last time that Diamond Dallas Page worked with a celebrity in a tag match.
Not at all. Not at all.
Yeah, that's one thing. Like, I was like, I guess a super mark in like 98. And so, yeah, I was into WCW the first half of the year. And then the celebrity stuff hit, with the stuff we're talking about now, like all the tag matches with DDP and the celebrities. And I guess I went back to hating WCW for a while. And I'm like, well, they're just copying off WWF because they did like the Mike Tyson thing. So now they got to do their own celebrity thing. So I guess I just bought into that, and I was such a stupid mark. But yeah, now going back and watching it, like it's now like 20 years later. It's just fun. And it seemed like a lot of times WCW maybe didn't have a lot of fun or something, and this is them having fun. So it's like, right. I can't hate it anymore.
And you see the business side to it too, and it makes sense as you get older and you kind of realize why they do the things they do, even if it's not what necessarily appeals to you as, like you said, a Marky Mark little kid. Who's really spending money on these pay-per-views, right? Well, I can tell you that not even having much of a disposable income back then, being all of probably 14 years old, Bash at the Beach 1998 was the first of any wrestling pay-per-view I ever purchased. Like, I was just, my parents weren't going to pay for it, but I was like, I've got some allowance money. I want to get this pay-per-view, and they let me do it.
Yeah,
so I had to pay for it, but I saw it.
Oh yeah, I was going to say that my buddy Nick, I was telling him that we did the Road Wild show, and he said that he actually ordered Road Wild just for Jay Leno. So it's funny that he's like
wow.
The bikers getting into it.
There you go.
Poor soul.
Now, Andrew, you being a basketball guy, I can't speak to this whatsoever, but you being the expert that you are and the fan that you are, were you super into the Rodman Malone stuff, or was that kind of not on your radar?
Oh no, I was into it. Like, remember too, that was Game 6. The last game of the '98 season, is that's the Last Dance. Or actually, Netflix is going to be doing a documentary about Jordan's career, and that it's called The Last Dance, and it's about the '98 season, which is right before this ends.
Oh wow!
And what happened is there's a moment in Game 6 where Rodman and Karl Malone they're tussling because they both were power forwards, and Rodman knew how to get under Malone's skin. Malone was the top scorer. He was the MVP candidate for the Jazz. They obviously had John Stockton and Jeff Hornacek too, but Malone was the man. And so it was really up to Rodman. Now Rodman's defensive acumen, it kind of slipped in '98, but he was still like a top rebounder. And so he was sort of put on Malone a lot in isolation to try to get rebounds. Well, there's a moment where they're under the basket and they get arm locked and they fall backwards. And what happens is Rodman is sort of trolling Malone, or they're actually kind of trolling each other, trying to draw contact while they're trying to get up. So there's like this really weird moment where, and you can look it up on YouTube, where they're bumping bodies like 3 or 4 different times, and then Rodman basically just hooks him with his arm and they fall forward, and the ref called a technical foul on Rodman. And Costas makes mention of the fact. So I don't know how highly publicized it was leading into it. I'm sure it was like a month or 2 in advance, but Costas makes mention that they had already scheduled a wrestling match where Rodman was going to wrestle Malone, and Costas, being just despising wrestling, said, why they would stoop to that low, I will never know. And this is Game 6. This was this is to this day, I believe, the highest rated NBA basketball game of all time. It was Game 6 of the finals when Jordan hit the shot over Byron Russell. It's one of the 5 most famous NBA games of all time. So
That's
a
amazing.
lot of free publicity for that match and a lot of hype. And the thing too is that there was a lockout coming up in the NBA. So we didn't know when we were going to see him again. That was probably one of the motivations behind why Malone and Rodman did it. Rodman knew that was the last year with the Bulls. So he just said, well, I'll go ahead and do this. And Malone probably said, I'll get a really good payday off of this.
Yeah.
I'm not going to have to, even if I get injured, I have not only do I probably have an insurance policy, but I'll recover in time for the start of the season, because the season's not going to start in November because we know we're headed for a lockout. So there was probably a little bit of logic going into that. But yeah, the excitement factor for any basketball fan was there. I just don't think anybody was anticipating the Brainbusters versus the Hart Foundation.
No, yeah, certainly not. Yeah.
It was just more of just like pomp and circumstance. The thing that's also important to note about DDP and Karl Malone is that the now probably the most famous match. Is it fair to say Goldberg Hogan is the most famous match in WCW history? Is it fair to say that?
Certainly in, I would say, Nitro history.
That was the go home show for Bash at the Beach, and Kurt Hennig was supposed to wrestle Goldberg, and so Hennig is coming in to help out Hogan at the end of that match, the Hogan Goldberg Nitro match at the Georgia Dome that had 50,000+ people. Mm-hmm. And DDP and Malone come out, and Karl Malone gives Kurt Hennig the diamond cutter. So you
on the floor, right?
So out of context, you're just like a WWE Network young browser, and you're here, Goldberg Hogan, that's the match, and you see Karl Malone giving Mr. Perfect a diamond cutter, and you're like, what the hell is this? But yeah, really super random to have them involved, but very calculated. But yeah, they were, in terms of Q rating, Rodman and Malone were at the top.
Excellent. And I know we're kind of taking these two celebrity matches together, but they're kind of the same thing. So it just makes sense that we talk about them sort of in the same breath here. And this is what WCW summer of 1998 is really riding out on. The big, Hogan return, which he often timed this to, it would be after the NBA Finals. Hogan would make his big TV return, and either pop a rating or take credit for the higher ratings they would already get, since they're not having to compete with basketball.
And not only that, he would purposely not appear for the May and June shows when TNT would preempt the Monday night slot for NBA playoffs. So they would have either shorter shows, or their shows would be taped and shown later. Like the infamous DX Invades Raw. That was a taped show. Because either it was a tape show or it was a live 1 hour show because of the playoffs. And so Hogan would not be there, and the ratings would be down because people didn't know when to watch it. This was the TV Guide era where you just had to sort of like watch television and just hope that your show comes on. And the ratings would be down, and then Hogan would come to the rescue in July, like you said, when there was nothing to watch, and pop a rating and say, hey, without me, you wouldn't have gotten this rating. The other thing too about Leno is that Leno was beating Letterman in the ratings. He was a very, very popular celebrity also. Yes. So they got very lucky with that. I don't know if David Letterman would have done too. I was going to say,
so does this mean if Letterman was beating Leno in the ratings, we would have gotten a David Letterman DDP tag match?
Well, Bischoff tells a story that, when he told, you remember this, Eric Bischoff recreated the Tonight Show set. So if you want to know where those millions of dollars in budget was going, it was recreating Jay Leno's set. But Bischoff was doing like jokes. Well, he said later that those jokes that he told on those monologues on Nitro were actually jokes that they gave to Jay Leno. It was from the Tonight Show writers, and they basically handed it to him.
Huh.
Like about Monica Lewinsky and whatnot,
Yeah.
The one thing that was funny, I'll get away from basketball, is that probably because of his rights and the fact that they just didn't want to threaten, have any litigation threatened for mentioning him, Michael Jordan was never mentioned on Nitro ever. Like, they always said the Chicago Bulls. They never mentioned Michael Jordan. I never figured out why. I don't know if that was like a Turner mandate of like, don't mention Michael, or maybe Air Jordan's people came in and said, do not associate us with this show. But if you ever watch this, like Bash at the Beach when Page and Malone wrestled Rodman and Hogan, I don't even think Michael Jordan is mentioned once.
I can't recall him ever being mentioned. So yeah, maybe that is them being gun shy from a legal standpoint. And
that was a problem with WCW all the time. They always aired on the side of caution, always. Mm-hmm. When it came to just violence, when it came to language, when it came to like mentioning the competition, it was very cut and dry. You know.
So this is like all-time high ratings they're getting. You've got Hogan back in the mix, whether it's a chicken or the egg problem with Hogan. Either way, they're getting mega ratings. They've got the mainstream celebrity involvement. It's the summer, kids are out of school, everybody's watching wrestling, and DDP is just in the thick of this.
Yeah, Warrior comes back. That's the same night that Bill Clinton admits that he had an affair with Monica Lewinsky.
Oh my God!
It was literally at the exact same time that he made that announcement.
Is there anything more 1998 than that?
Yeah, and remember too. I mean, because I'm sure y'all have been talking about WWF '98. WWF is on fire. Right?
Oh yeah,
like right here. This is peak popularity of wrestling. DDP is like right in the center,
right in the mix.
Yeah,
and this whole feud with Hogan came about. We didn't cover this, but it happens because the Wolfpack, the offshoot of the NWO, is recruiting new members, and they want Diamond Dallas Page and ask him to join. As he is giving his rather prolonged answer, before he can firmly say yes or no, it is Hogan and Dennis Rodman that come out and attack DDP, hit him with chairs from behind. And so we never get an answer whether he's in or out with the Wolfpack. That comes to a head after these celebrity tag team main events, going into Fall Brawl Wargames 1998. He does tell Kevin Nash the answer is no, not going to join the Wolfpack. I was so glad he didn't join the Wolfpack. That would have been, I think, a real disaster for him, just career-wise. He would have probably lost all of his heat as just that solo babyface, very individual character. Look what it did to Sting and Luger. God. I was very, very grateful that they did not pull the trigger on that, because I was really not sure the way that they were grabbing guys up. But anyway, it leads to the Wargames match. It's DDP, Piper, the returning Warrior, as you mentioned, against the Wolfpack and against NWO Hollywood, which is Hollywood Hogan, Stevie Ray, and Bret Hart, who's not a member of NWO.
A.K.A. NWO Black and White.
Yes, NWO Black and White.
And their horrible music.
And so, terrible match, which DDP wins. Gets a title shot against Goldberg, heading into Halloween Havoc. And everybody points to that as Goldberg's first real competitive match. Did either of you get this pay-per-view?
No, I did not.
And did it cut off for you?
No, thankfully I watched it for free.
Okay.
But that was Cox Communications. I saw the entire thing. Okay. I don't know if it was sort of a local issue where certain ones, like maybe someone can help me with the other ones, like Viewer's Choice or whatever one it was that provider used. Like a lot of them basically just cut it off.
I mean, you had Comcast, which I've got and would have been around back then as a big one. I didn't get the show, so I don't know whether I would have been impacted one way or the other. Point being, the show for a lot of providers cut off prematurely before the event was over, so people missed the match.
And Halloween Havoc '98, in terms of success, it's one of the biggest shows they had. It's by far the biggest pay-per-view they had in 1998. It was like a murderer's row of matches. It was it was Hogan Warrior, which we hadn't seen in in 8 years. It was Page and Goldberg at the top, the main event, the last match. Which I would bet there was a lot of politicking on how that one went last.
Yeah.
Scott Hall and Kevin Nash, which ended in a schmoz.
Mm-hmm.
Bret Hart and Sting, which ended with cheating. And there was a handful of other matches I can't remember off the top of my head, but it was a big show, and it kind of had a big fart noise for almost all the matches leading up to it involving the top guys like Nash and Hogan, except for the Goldberg DDP match, which had a finite ending. It was very well done. It was very well worked. It's a lot of people credit it as Goldberg's best match, period.
Mm-hmm.
You know, and in classic WCW fashion, one of the only like genuinely great matches from WCW at that time, no one even saw it. So
here's the thing.
They had to give it away on Nitro the next day.
Again, a match that people otherwise might not have seen involving DDP, you get to see for free. So, I don't know, man. He was kind of the recipient of some good timing, perhaps. I mean, I don't think you don't blame the competitors for that.
Great for him. It's great for Page. Like, and people say, yeah, but he lost. Yeah, but nobody even remotely touched Bill Goldberg before that, let alone gave him their finishing move and almost pinned them.
Right.
You know, which is what happens here. Page told a story that when Goldberg hits the post, he legitimately knocked himself out.
Yep.
So yeah, one of those got to look closer type of deals when you rewatch these matches. But fantastic match. You know, the crowd is into it big time, and Page, just because he's like one of those guys he takes pride in mapping out matches. He had the idea of like, well, Goldberg's bigger and stronger and faster than me, but I can outsmart him.
Mm-hmm.
You know, I'm the veteran, and that was actually a really great angle to go through it. And it was a babyface versus babyface match.
Yeah. And people bit on that false finish when he hit the diamond cutter.
Oh, they thought it was over.
They thought it was because the Diamond Cutter was kept so strong. And it was like, if he had won, honestly, I think people would have bought into it. They would have, I don't know that anyone wanted necessarily to see Goldberg lose, but the streak was such a thing. And everybody's
Goldberg was the second most popular wrestler in the world. He was more popular than The Rock. The Rock didn't really, he was big by that point. He was a champion, but he didn't really hit the stratosphere until a year later when SmackDown started. But Steve Austin was number 1 and Goldberg was number 2.
Easily. Yes. And it was like every match with Goldberg is this where the streak is going to end? So anybody who got that first win over him, it was going to get a ginormous pop. So I think they could have gotten away with it there. Would it have been the right decision? No. Would it have been a worse decision than what they did? Probably not.
No, it would have been. You couldn't have done any worse than what they did to Goldberg at Starrcade. Like you couldn't have done it any worse. But that's for another discussion.
Yes. Well, DDP does right after that match as maybe a consolation prize. He wins the U.S. title from Bret Hart on Nitro, and leads to a nice little feud between them. I thought those two had good chemistry, and they had a rematch at World War III. They had a third war. Easy for me to say.
World War III. Yeah.
Yes, every year for a while there. So that's
World War IV, World War V.
No,
it was just World War III, and it just never ended. But their matches were solid. You know, this was right when Hogan left because he wanted to run for president.
Yes.
Because Jesse Ventura won governor, so he thought, well, if Jesse can do it, I can be president, which was just like, yeah.
I know it's controversial to say that Bret Hart had any good WCW matches other than that one with Benoit, the Owen tribute.
Yes.
But I thought they did all right. I know Bret wasn't playing the type of character that he wanted to be playing, and I know he was unhappy, but it worked for what it was. I mean, maybe that's just me being
he wrestled the Giant a lot because Bret got hurt. I mean, here we go again. Bret Hart got hurt, so he couldn't wrestle Starrcade. So, like, you have your most. I understand the idea that Halloween Havoc in the eyes of a lot of people was like WCW's biggest show, but Starrcade was their most like traditional show.
Yeah.
And so many times you had like these big time guys that could not do the shows. Like look at Starrcade '98. Like no Bret.
Oh my God, that's a terrible undercard.
Bret was there, but he was hurt. No Sting. He's taking a break. No Luger. No Hogan. Scott Hall was there.
Yeah, doing a run-in.
Or was he?
We
never found out who that really was. And yeah, Nash beats Goldberg on top, but so DDP beats the Giant in that one in a lengthy match, and but yeah, I felt like the Bret Hart stuff with DDP was cut short. I thought they had decent chemistry. I thought they were both sort of old wrestling souls, so they kind of fit each other nicely. And then we went into the Wolfpack versus WCW feud, where they rebranded the NWO, kind of basically hit the reset button, and Page is sort of brought to he's feuding with Scott Steiner.
Right.
Like, and it's sort of like trying to get Steiner over.
Yeah, and that was this is where a weird turn happens for company as a whole, and DDP is maybe a microcosm of that, where, they do the Steiner match. It was like at Super Brawl 9, which Steiner wins, puts DDP on the shelf. I mean, this is where they're doing the stuff with Kimberly also, where Steiner is like terrorizing her, some pretty fucked up stuff, throws not her but a stunt double out of a moving car at one point. Hasn't really aged well. Not that it was anything revolutionary or praiseworthy at the time, but when DDP comes back from selling that beatdown, he's more of a tweener. got kind of a different attitude and goes into that Spring Stampede main event in 1999. It's a fatal four-way of a returning Sting, Hollywood Hogan, and Ric Flair for the world title. And it's sort of like one of these guys is not like the others, but he ends up winning it there to the shock of many.
And that's what I was talking about with like Diamond Dallas Page was in the center of all the fame, and he was getting a lot of publicity, and he was very well known in circles as like one of the top names, but it still kind of shows to where he was at, in the totem pole in WCW when you got these big names and he wins the title. And everyone's like, huh? Mm-hmm. Like they still could not wrap their head around it. Like Diamond Dallas Page won the title, and it's not like the WCW championship was super protected.
No.
But fairly big names all held the belt. And for DDP to get that's great for him, but it just took a lot of people by surprise.
Did it feel to either of you guys was it a little bit like they missed their window, or was it that the character turn that was taking place with Page maybe took the wind out of your sails? Because to me, I'm like, DDP is my guy. It should be a huge, massive, big deal to me when he wins the world title. And I kind of thought, yeah, it's a big moment for him career-wise, but as a fan, I'm like, I can tell they're going to turn him heel. If they haven't already, it is so coming. That is definitely the direction that
didn't he have a sit-down interview with Mike Tenay where he was really super aggressive and kind of miserable.
Yeah, you're being really shitty about it.
Yeah, and you could just tell, they're going in a new direction with Page. And then he comes back. This was also the time where Bischoff was back from his sabbatical, and they redesigned the logo, and they redesigned Nitro. So Spring Stampede 99 is actually one of the legit best shows WCW's had.
Oh yeah,
definitely, yeah.
Really good up and down show. And I guess that when that show came right after they redesigned the Nitro set. So I guess it was this idea of, well, we need to push for something new because what we got isn't working. And they had just had Hogan and Flair on top. So they were like, well, let's give Hogan some time off and we'll kind of move Flair over with other people and we'll put the belt on DDP. Well, the funny part is that they dropped the belt off of DDP a month later.
Yeah.
In fact,
they do the thing.
Yeah.
They do a thing on Nitro a couple weeks after that where it's opening match. He has a title defense against Sting. Sting wins the belt, and it was a really good match. And then later in the show, they book another fatal four-way where now it's Sting defending DDP,
Goldberg,
Nash, and Goldberg. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And he ends up winning the belt back on the same night that he lost it. And it was just kind of again, one of those very experimental, gimmicky things to pop a rating that we've got DDP at the center of. So kind of a theme is emerging here that I didn't necessarily expect with this episode is how he's at the center of all this major groundbreaking stuff that WCW was doing. That didn't necessarily wasn't necessarily designed to put him over exclusively. It's he kind of happened to be there.
Yeah. That's how people felt about Tommy Dreamer at ECW, kind of.
Yeah, I could see that comparison as well. Yeah. I don't know. I thought they could have gotten a lot more mileage out of the People's Champion babyface DDP rather than turning him when they did. Having said that, I do like what they go into that summer with the Triad. So DDP drops the belt to Kevin Nash at was it Slamboree, And then, just to kind of keep him in the mix, they've got him doing tag stuff. So he joins up with Bam Bam Bigelow, and Canyon gets added to that group as well. They are now the Jersey Boys, or the Jersey Triad. They win the tag team titles, and they're defending it under Freebird rules. So feuding with guys like Benoit and Malenko and Saturn and all these different combinations, giving us pretty solid TV matches and good pay-per-view.
Chris Canyon, God rest his soul, good wrestler.
Mm-hmm.
Very innovative.
Innovator of offense. In fact.
Yes.
Not unlike Tommy Dreamer. But I think we've given a lot of love to the Triad, our namesake.
The one thing I will say about Paige, that you got to remember when this is. This is summer of '99, and you could just see this. I mean, it's so crazy how fast it went with WCW in terms of like morale and business. Like by the summer of '99 in WCW, you could see the toilet draining. Like you could
toiletry.
You could see that their options for doing better and being able to getting back ahead of WWF or being able to match their ratings, that like the opportunity was gone and that things weren't looking good.
Right. They weren't going to be able to get it back.
I do remember this. I remember Paige cutting promos where he was almost very laissez-faire. It almost looked like he lost interest. Hate to say it that way, but it definitely felt that way during the Triad stuff when he was feuding with Benoit the second time. You could just tell that he was just kind of miserable.
Yeah, because it almost seems so like weird. It's like was probably the MVP of like 1998, the only guy that had like a solid year, because Hogan was kind of gone for a while, like you said, running for president, and he lost the belt. And then Goldberg, he was so hot, but it seemed like he kind of cooled off when he got the belt.
Mm-hmm.
Like DDP, he stayed consistent throughout the whole year. It's almost like he kind of earned like a title shot, or actually to be the man in '99. But you're right, he was never in that top tier. He was always just below it. And when he did get the belt, it was just like a cup of coffee, like Savage would say. Like he never had like a solid run, and it kind of sucks.
Yeah. And then it was right. This is when Russo comes in. I will say this: we can kind of scan through late '99 pretty easily with Page, because he sat out a few months, I think, with injuries, and also they really didn't involve him too much in any of the feuds or the main storylines. I'm not sure exactly what was going on, because he was used much more by Russo, like in 2000.
I mean, for one thing, the Triad never officially broke up. They just kind of went separate ways. Yeah, just went away. And at Halloween Havoc of '99, the very first Russo-controlled show, DDP has probably the only good match on that entire show against Flair. It's a strap match, which is basically built off of Flair sexually harassing and attempting to assault Kimberly. Flair is the face, DDP is the heel. Welcome, Vince Russo.
Flair's the face in that, but he's what?
So, don't you remember how? I mean, Flair was doing the very Ric Flair stuff, like trying to come on to Kimberly, and Flair is Flair, and he's being booked as a face here. But he loses that match to DDP, and then gets buried alive in the desert by the filthy animals.
Yes. He literally gets buried.
Yeah. And DDP disappears after that, as you said. I think that he was filming Ready to Rumble.
That makes sense. I didn't even think about that.
I think that the timing makes it seem like that's what would have been going on.
And then we had that weird Kevin Sullivan booked interim period where Russo had basically been voted out by Bill Bush.
Yes.
And I don't remember what Page was doing around then.
He was gone again.
Yeah, he was gone. And then it gets kind of strange. Russo and Bischoff come together, which created, like, still probably my favorite WCW era for very weird, unexplained reasons, the New Blood era.
Yep.
And Page,
No, I'm with you in a way.
Page is like highly focused in this. Like, he is at the very top of pretty much all the matches. Like, he's feuding for the world title almost all the time. But it's so random. It's so convoluted. The booking is so ADHD that, like, he's literally going from feuding with Jeff Jarrett to feuding with Eric Bischoff to teaming up with Kanyon to Kanyon turning on him to feuding with, tagging with David Arquette. And we can get that in a second. But
Well, it was like so I think he came back on that spring breakout Nitro in 2000. And
the one where that's the wall is on the top of the building.
Yeah. yes, thank you. So this is right before the Nitro reboot with Russo and Bischoff. And you're right. I mean, all of a sudden he gets booked to the top as soon as they do that reboot and create the Millionaires Club and the New Blood, and he was like Stone Cold Dallas Page. He was the WCW version of Steve Austin, I think, is how Russo was trying to book him.
Yeah, and the pretty locks are gone, so he's got the short hair going on. And I mean, we didn't really talk about this yet either, but I think another reason for his popularity is because he used "Smells Like Teen Spirit's," B-side music for as his entrance. And I mean, that was one of the most beloved rock songs of the 90s. So any casual person who is listening to Nitro in the background, the moment they hear that, they know, oh, that's Nirvana. And then they see Diamond Dallas Page. It kind of gave him that sense of being cool. And with the hair, he was grungy. You thought,
he was grungy.
Yeah, this guy's off the beaten path. But then by the time we get to 2000, like, Diamond Dallas Page is a superstar. Like, he's just as famous as by this point. He's as well known in WCW as pretty much all of them. But he's also the standard bearer. He's the workhorse. He's the guy that never left.
And I think that's why he was handed the somewhat thankless task of getting these celebrities ready to go, because you mentioned it. This is the infamous David Arquette title win. I think there's probably a lot more to say about this than strictly can be covered in a Diamond Dallas Page episode.
We could talk about his famous book Positively Page. Became like a nightly foreign object for Chris Kanyon. Because it was literally loaded with a brick. Somebody took one of Page's hardcover books. They literally cut it, like they like carved it, and they put a brick inside of the.
Great, awesome. And that was part of the whole. We're gonna destroy Diamond Dallas Page's life. So first, Kimberly turns on him, right, at Spring Stampede, and then his good friend David Arquette turns on him at the triple cage match, the return of the Doomsday Cage, really. And then his best friend, who was thrown off the top of said Doomsday Cage in the same arena where Owen Hart plummeted to his death, he reveals that, I guess, that was a work, or he changed his mind after the fact. I don't know. But he has turned on DDP and joined the New Blood, Chris Kanyon. And then he has a match with Mike Awesome, who was newly signed and on his way up in WCW, and that like puts DDP on the shelf for a while.
Yeah.
Kanyon is still running around doing he's doing a riff on the Positively Page catchphrase and gimmick, where he's hitting random people with diamond cutters, which he is now reappropriated as the Canyon Cutter.
Yeah, he's wearing a wig too, right?
He's wearing a wig, yes. So he's dressed as DDP, wearing the wig, doing his move. There was one incredible segment on a Thunder. I don't know if you remember this, where they're showing like a backstage security footage almost, and it's from a distance. It's almost an aerial shot, but you can still make out like figures, people moving around, doing whatever, and you kind of see. You can only just make it out. Somebody run in and hit a diamond cutter on a random like security or valet person off screen, and it's Canyon doing his gimmick. And it was like, this is the running gag throughout the entire show, and this was Canyon basically taking over Thunder in the summer of 2000 with his Positively Canyon gimmick. It's amazing.
Wow. That I cannot remember. But
he hits Judy Bagwell.
Yeah, I remember that because like she had a neck brace or something, and Buff Bagwell was like, "No, don't hit my mom," and they showed something like that on the screen where it was a backstage kind of thing, and you just kind of see his legs, I think, do it. And I don't know if you saw like
2000
Judy.
WCW is just it's a beautiful disaster. It's like
incredible.
You don't know what the hell's going on. I don't think they knew what was going on.
No. You would think this is all leading up to a DDP return where he's gonna get his revenge against Chris Canyon, right?
Nope.
So Canyon disappears. He gets fired and rehired or something. But he goes away for a little while. And DDP comes back, and this gets into tagging with Kevin Nash of all things.
Because there was nowhere else left to tag with.
Well, yeah,
I think Goldberg was feuding with Luger of all people.
Mm-hmm.
Scott Hall's gone.
Yep.
I'm trying to think. Sting's out of commission, or he's just taking a break. And Flair came back, but Flair was the president of WCW. Like he was a figure.
Yeah. Well, and then they're getting into this is leading up to the Flair stable at the tail end of WCW period, which is the Magnificent Seven.
Yeah, was Denzel Washington in that one too?
But basically, it's DDP and Kevin Nash in this tag team. They're called not the Outsiders, but the Insiders. Play on their their backstage pull or something. It's very, and this is after Vince Russo, so he's really gone for good now, and we're just running on fumes, right? So they have matches with no longer the New Blood. Now it is the Natural Born Thrillers. You remember that stable? Better Than Average Mike Sanders as their leader, and you've got Jindrak and O'Hare, that tag team. You got Chuck Palumbo and Sean Stasiak.
Was Big Vito in it?
I think Big Vito was in it, and then he broke off from the group and feuded with them. Johnny the Bull was in it.
Okay. I'm just thinking I got the wrong Mama Luke.
And I'm not going to lie, I like some of those matches.
Oh, yeah. I mean, Paige is just solid. At this point in WCW, it is so stripped down that you're just looking for anything to enjoy. You know, so like any Scott Steiner promo where he accidentally curses, like any Booker T match, like anything that Diamond Dallas Page can pull out of his ass. Like people are literally being cut from their contracts because Turner's ready to like just get rid of WCW altogether. Yep. You know, and you're seeing people, and you're seeing a lot of guys like I don't know if Low Key ever showed up at WCW, but I know AJ Styles did.
Yes, he did.
And you're starting to see some like fresher faces. They want to do the Johnny Ace is the booker now because Russo was shipped out like a second time. And, things were kind of strange in WCW at that point because you knew the end was near, but you didn't know when and you didn't know who was going to take care of it once Turner was done with it. But you could see that things were sort of slowly improving. because they were sort of stripping it down to like just bare bone type of booking. It was very by the book.
In a world where WCW continues on, at least for a few months, you probably do get a real Page Canyon feud. But they were just basically out of time by then. And
they were out of time, Tony?
Desperately out of time. And at the very last pay-per-view, which is Greed, WCW Sloth, Wrath, Gluttony, and Greed, their last pay-per-view.
What's in the box? What's in the box? A pink slip.
Your termination orders, yeah. You get DDP and Scott Steiner, who was then their world champion, and Steiner's just mowing through like all the top babyface contenders, putting them on the shelf, and DDP is just going to be like his latest victim. So, I mean, they have a decent little match, which Steiner, of course, wins, and go into an injury, I guess, angle, which is unfortunate because the next night is the very last Nitro, and DDP is not on it.
I will say about the Greed match, before we get in, that's actually a really good match.
That Steiner match?
Yeah, the last match, the main event.
I haven't watched it in a while, but I remember liking it. I haven't seen it in so long that I'm like, okay.
It's a brawl. I think it's like a no disqualification match. The other thing that happened, I don't remember the timeline of this because, when it comes to backstage stuff, you're never absolutely sure unless like literally you have a video back there. But yep. Steiner and DDP got into an infamous, now IWC infamous backstage fight.
That's true. Yep.
Yeah.
Which a lot of that I think had to do with the stuff with Kimberly because she ended up leaving.
Well, he called her a whore. Mm-hmm. Yeah, and he took offense to it, and something happened where like Steiner during the skirmish Steiner tried to poke his eye out
oh Jesus.
Yeah, from the that's how heated it got. But yeah, they wound up wrestling each other in the last WCW pay-per-view. It was the final match. So.
Mm-hmm. Yep. And I mean that's DDP's WCW career. It's kind of our show. We could talk about WWF, but what is there to say? I mean, for one thing, we're not a WWF podcast, but
what we could say about the WWF one is that it sucked.
It's very disappointing, and it would depress us to talk about. So he obviously made some relationships that have had really lasting value into today. I mean, look at the stuff he's doing now with DDP Yoga and pretty much turning the lives around of some of these people that had been written off as lost causes for years.
Well, he's a very giving person.
Mm-hmm.
Like he takes well, a lot of people would say that he's a great self-promoter, but he's also the kind of guy who, if he can give you a chance, he gets the adrenaline off of being able to give people a second chance in life.
Yeah.
And definitely that's the case for Jake the Snake Roberts, Scott Hall, both of whom have had terrible, addictions and drug addictions, and has basically just turned them around. They use the yoga for the, as the platform for the rehabilitation, but just the fact that he's been able to help out people who are in a really, really bad place is a testament to his gratitude.
Right. And I mean, they had many false starts over the years in and out of rehab and just seemed like nothing took. And I'm not saying that, DDP single-handedly did what the system itself could not, but clearly he was able to get through to them on some level. The difference was having someone who can say, look, I get it. We were wrestlers. I know what you've been through. I know that you feel like shit physically, and, you've got a lot of issues and a lot of baggage. So, yeah, it's just been a testament. And I think one of the great wrestling success stories. Any final thoughts? We'll do a quick lightning round here before we wrap up. Pick your favorite DDP match. Andrew, you first. Put you on the spot.
His first match with Savage at Spring Stampede.
Okay. Andy, do you have a different answer?
Yeah, I'd go with the Goldberg one from Halloween Havoc.
You like the Goldberg one. For me, I think I will also say that Savage match, Spring Stampede, just because of how important it was and how good it was.
One you brought up that no one talks about but definitely needs mention, so I'm glad you mentioned it earlier. The one he had with Sting and Nitro where he dropped the title is a really good match.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. So, what about, like, best feud? So, not necessarily produced the best matches, but, I mean, I know they kind of go hand in hand, but is there a feud that stands out to you that head and shoulders above all others for DDP?
You know, Randy's too easy.
In a way, right?
I mean, like if I wanted to be devil's advocate, this one might be weird. I actually enjoyed his feud with Jeff Jarrett.
Okay.
Like, I actually kind of enjoyed it.
In 2000?
Yes.
I mean, the matches aren't bad, and I know that you've got like the fondness for that insane reboot era Nitro. And look, I'm with you. That is some of the most entertaining train wreck stuff to watch.
The correct answer is not Johnny B. Bad.
Yeah. Well, it's sort of his first long-term feud, but I don't think anyone's gonna put it up there. Andy, what do you got?
DDP Raven, because I remember Spring Stampede, they had the match for the U.S. title, but then wasn't there something on MTV or it was something where he hit Raven with a sign, but then pulled it off, and it was like a stop sign. Like it was like, am I remembering something?
It said
right?
"Use my sign."
Yeah.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. Lodi would always come out with the signs, and yeah, he had a sign that was literally, it just said "Use my sign," and it was a stop sign that was concealed within, I guess, two signs that were glued together. That was pretty fun. But yeah,
what was the MTV thing? I remember
the
them
MTV
doing something
thing was they were promoting a music video that DDP was in, and I'm trying to remember
because this would have been around the time as the Snow Brawl and the Beach Brawls and stuff.
Oh man, who's Stuck Mojo? Why is that name in my head?
Chris Jericho's like Fozzy band members before they were Fozzy, and they had that CD with the U.S. title belt on it.
I want to say DDP was in one of their music videos, and they were promoting it on MTV. And then Raven came in and gave him the even flow, like in the studio in this MTV segment,
in the TRL studio or something.
Yeah.
Since we're talking about the cross promotion, I wanted to ask this. Since so many years have gone by, and a lot of wrestling fans, they make fun of it, but some people maybe watch it and enjoy the campier parts of it. And since Paige was so directly involved with the story, do you feel like Ready to Rumble has like cult status?
Oh.
I mean, if that makes any sense, because everything seems like a cult-like film. But is it like an enjoyable film?
I mean, it doesn't really get talked about in the same conversations as actual, cult movies, which, let's face it, I mean, we're talking movies that are bad, but people love in spite of themselves,
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if there are enough people that really love that movie and take up for it whilst recognizing how shitty it is.
Yes.
I watched
maybe
that may have been his greatest feud with the King.
Jimmy the King.
Yes, Oliver Platt. Or is that Oliver Platt?
Yeah.
No, Wayne.
Yeah, it's Oliver Platt.
It is Oliver Platt.
It is Oliver Platt.
I always mix him up and Alfred Molina, who is Dr. Octopus in Spider-Man 2.
Yeah.
Always mix them up. And then freaking Ian McShane rolls in, and now I don't know anybody anymore.
I'd always mix up Oliver Platt with the actor who was on Murphy Brown that was like the painter and Forever Painting Her House. Because they both kind of had the shortish mullet hair and the goatee kind of thing, right, going on?
Mm-hmm. No, it's always Molina and Ian McShane from Deadwood and American Gods. Like, anytime I see one of those three, I'm like, oh, that one is the other person, you know?
Tremendous. I think my favorite feud, I'm gonna go the Flock. Also, I'm gonna stick in there with my co-host. Just that whole post grunge aesthetic where you got DDP in the blue jeans and the hair and smells like Teen Spirit, and Raven, of course, just is Jesus God, just a total like quintessential grunge iconic look. And he's got he wasn't using that instrumental version of Come As You Are yet, I don't think, but later on he'll adopt that. But just that whole thing, I mean, man, that's so foundational to why I even still care about wrestling today, probably. And just pure escapist entertainment. It so sucked me in, dude. Just, I also love how all the guys that DDP interacted with early in his career. Look at Vinny Vegas, Kevin Nash. Look at the Diamond Stud, Scott Hall. Look at Scotty Flamingo becoming Raven. They all made it in different ways, and they all sort of came back together, or at least he was the connective tissue.
Yeah, and because of his age and how much mileage he put in, he has been in touch with so many people. I mean, his first boss was Vern Gagne, you know, and probably Eddie Graham. You know, I mean, that's incredible. You know, how because at this point he's 62 years old. You know, just how much
unreal. Just
how much connection he's put into his career. You know, with people before they became legends, and then when they were legends, right in the peak of the Monday Night Wars. He's just had a really fascinating, really fortunate, but really well-earned career.
Absolutely. Couldn't have said it better. And with that, I think that's going to conclude our survey of Diamond Dallas Page and our second anniversary as well. But before we get out of here, Andrew Riche, if you have anything you would like to put over, promote, the floor is yours, my friend.
Just keep tuning in with the NBA team. We're going to be back in the thick of it with season previews really soon.
Awesome. Excellent. Andy Savage, anything you would like to promote, social or otherwise?
Well, there is the Survey _ Says Instagram account. I need to update that a little bit more because I think I've kind of let it be a little bit quiet for a while.
Yeah, well, your Instagram game is still stronger than me. I won't even advertise my Instagram. I will advertise my Twitter. I am at Psych68 on Twitter. Andrew, do you have a Twitter?
At Andrew Riche. At Andrew Riche. But you're not going to get a reply from me.
Oh, well, very good to know.
So tweet me, but don't.
So don't bother, in other words.
Yeah.
We're going to get out of here then. I hope you enjoyed this very special episode, aren't they all, of Survey Says, looking at one of our favorites and one of the all-time greats of WCW. Coming up next on Movies for Guys Who Like Movies, it is First Daughter, starring Muriel Hemingway, Doug Savant, and some guy named Paige Falkenberg. So look forward to that.
Oh, I thought it was going to be the Toxic Avenger.
Oh, who did he ever beat? I'm getting word now that we are desperately out of time. Folks, we gotta go!
One time you love me, other times you hate me. One thing's for sure,